Imagine getting isekai'd into a world of magic, only to discover that you're officially the weakest person alive. Not weak, not below average, the weakest. Xiaolin's stats were so bad that they became a record nobody wanted. But while everyone laughed at his trash talent, they had no idea he was hiding an SS rank cheat skill, a broken ability that lets him learn over 100 times faster than everyone else. And that's not even the scary part, because Xiaolin can also copy the unique skills of other people and make them his own. What happens when the weakest freshman in the academy gains the power to steal talents and grow faster than anyone in the world? Well, let's just say the people mocking him won't be laughing for very long. If you enjoy overpowered protagonist, insane growth, and satisfying revenge, make sure to subscribe to the channel. The title of this manhwa is The SS Rank Freshman of the Super Magic Academy. Now then, let's dive into the story. Someone felt extremely dizzy. The young man slowly opened his eyes because the noise around him was far too loud. Confused, he wondered what exactly was going on. There were countless people gathered inside the room. The young man looked both shocked and confused. He had absolutely no idea what was happening or who any of those people were. Just moments ago, he had fallen asleep inside his own home, yet now he had somehow woken up in a completely unfamiliar place. It made him wonder whether he had been kidnapped or if all of this was simply a dream. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his head. Then, he remembered the strange letter he had received. The protagonist here is Xiaolin, a recent college graduate. Before finding a real job, he made a living by power leveling accounts in video games. Earlier that day, he had won several matches in a game, and after finishing for the day, he casually scrolled through his phone. While browsing, he came across a video showing a father violently beating his own child. The scene immediately reminded him of how his own father used to constantly call him trash. In order to prove that he was not the useless garbage everyone believed him to be, Xiaolin had moved out and decided to live on his own. He wanted to prove that he was not useless. He simply had not yet discovered what he was truly good at. However, he never could have expected what would happen next. Less than 2 days after moving out, he suddenly received a strange letter in the middle of the night. Curious, he opened it. The moment he did, black mist burst out from the envelope and wrapped itself around his body. The letter turned out to be an admission notice from Dawn Academy. It stated that he had been accepted as a preparatory freshman before instantly teleporting him there. In simple terms, Xiaolin had basically been forcibly kidnapped into that hellhole known as Dawn Academy through a mysterious letter. At first, he genuinely thought the entire thing was some kind of bizarre prank. A man nearby noticed that Xiaolin had finally woken up. The man mockingly questioned just how terrible Xiaolin's physical health was for him to remain unconscious for more than 3 straight hours. The surrounding crowd immediately began questioning the man about who he was. Some demanded to know whether this was an act of kidnapping. Others shouted that they wanted to leave immediately and threatened to call the police. The man clicked his tongue in annoyance. Then, he unleashed a sudden strike. The attack flew directly over everyone's heads. He coldly warned all of them to shut their mouths immediately. He complained that there were idiots like them in every single batch of freshmen. He even mocked the recruitment department and wondered whether those people simply sat around doing nothing all day long. He openly stated that the recruitment department was filled with complete morons. He added that since someone had woken up far too late and wasted everyone's time, he would keep the explanation short. The man introduced himself as Qin Chuan, a freshman counselor for Class 7 at Dawn Academy. He explained that all of them were chosen ones who would undergo brutal amounts of training to constantly improve themselves and temper their strength until they finally earned the qualifications needed to enter the new world. Most of the people there immediately assumed he was insane. Chuan calmly informed them that in this place they could obtain power, wealth, authority, and even immortality itself. He ordered everyone to put away their identification documents because they would immediately begin the potential assessment. Xiaolin estimated that there were at least 200 people gathered there, making it obvious that this could not possibly be an ordinary kidnapping case. He wondered what kind of place this truly was, and questioned whether he was even still on Earth anymore. The phrase "New World" sounded more like something out of an alien migration project. He also wondered whether the so-called potential assessment worked similarly to character stats in a video game. Soon afterward, a man stepped into a strange pod. A few moments later, the machine emitted a loud beep, signaling that the scan was complete. Chuan glanced at the results and coldly announced that the man's total attribute value was only 24, calling him complete trash. Then he immediately ordered the next person to step forward. A muscular-looking man stepped inside next and received 32 points, which Chuan considered somewhat decent. Chuan explained that on average, only 1 or 2 students per batch possessed data actually worth paying attention to. He swore that later on he would absolutely report the recruitment department directly to the principal and have those useless idiots reassigned to sorting garbage at the dump. He then impatiently called for the next student immediately. Xiaolin was the next person to enter the pod. However, the machine continued producing beeping sounds for far longer than normal. Xiaolin quickly noticed that his assessment was taking unusually long. Most people finished within 6 or 7 seconds, yet he had already been standing there for nearly an entire minute. Chuan quietly waited. Eventually, the machine finally announced that the scan had been completed. However, Chuan suddenly stopped Xiaolin because he wanted to personally examine the results. Since the scan had taken so long, he wondered whether an actual genius had finally appeared. But the moment he saw the results, his expression instantly changed into shock. The screen displayed Xiaolin's profile, revealing that he possessed only 2 points in strength, agility, intelligence, and 3 points in constitution. That meant his total attribute value was only 9 points. The moment Chuan saw the number, he made a completely disgusted face. He muttered that ever since entering Dawn Academy, he had never once seen attribute values this pathetic. Chuan loudly declared that this was the very first time he had ever witnessed a student with single-digit stats and openly called Xiaolin a rare species of trash. Xiaolin immediately felt terrible hearing that. Deep down, he felt that nobody there had even wanted to be dragged into this place in the first place. He also thought bitterly that if they were truly so capable, then they should simply send him back home immediately. Chuan looked deeply disappointed. He admitted that for a brief moment, he had thought an actual gifted student had appeared, only to have his expectations completely shattered after waiting so long. He directly called Xiaolin a complete loser. Hearing those words immediately reminded Xiaolin of all the times people had called him worthless in the past. From childhood to adulthood, no matter where Xiaolin went, people always scolded him and called him a loser. It made him furious that he still could not escape that title even after being dragged into this hellhole. Chuan bluntly stated that with attributes like those, entering the test was basically suicide. He even added that giving Xiaolin an identity nameplate was a complete waste. But Xiaolin suddenly snatched the nameplate away from him. He shouted that whether he was truly a loser or not could never be decided by a single number. No matter what happened, he would still personally take the test himself. Chuan scoffed and remarked that the student certainly had a stubborn mouth. He coldly decided that he would simply wait and watch reality slap Xiaolin directly in the face. He even warned him not to piss his pants in terror during the test later on. At that moment, a woman suddenly asked about the gifted students Chuan had mentioned earlier. Chuan explained that those people were the lucky few personally favored and fed by God himself. They were the strongest guarantees of survival in the new world and were practically destined to become powerful. Meanwhile, the rest of the class needed to focus on figuring out how to survive the entrance exam first. Another woman then asked about the unimaginable wealth and power Chuan had mentioned earlier. She wanted to know what kind of price they needed to pay in exchange for those things. Chuan remembered that her name was Gu Xiaoyue. She possessed the highest initial attribute values among everyone present, although her aptitude did not seem to indicate any special talent. He explained that within the academy, credits and redemption points functioned as the common currency and could be exchanged for practically anything they desired. Gu Xiaoyue calmly replied that she understood. Xiaolin found himself surprised that such a gentle and quiet-looking girl actually possessed the highest attributes in the entire group. He also noticed that Chuan spoke to her far more politely compared to everyone else, making it obvious that he thought highly of her. Chuan then instructed everyone to check their status windows by silently reciting the words, "check attributes" inside their minds. Xiaolin immediately tried it himself. A screen instantly appeared before him. It displayed his name along with his current 0 credits and 0 redemption points. His total initial attribute value was 24. His strength and agility were both 2, while his intelligence stood at 3. Both his physical attack assessment and magical attack assessment were ranked F. The screen further displayed that his natural lifespan was 83 years. Since he was currently 22 years old, he had roughly 60 years remaining. However, a warning underneath explained that every single time he died, 10 years of his lifespan would automatically be deducted. Once his remaining lifespan reached 0, he would die permanently. Xiaolin was completely shocked after learning this. The other people around him looked equally horrified after seeing the same information. Suddenly, a beeping sound caught Xiaolin's attention. A new notification suddenly appeared before him, stating that abnormal fluctuations had been detected within student Xiaolin. He could hardly believe that a hidden talent would actually awaken for someone considered as trash like him. Xiaolin quickly looked around at the others nearby. Then he realized that none of the other students had reacted to the notification at all. This immediately made him suspect that he was the only person capable of hearing the strange system alert. The system then displayed that both the talent name and talent level did not exist within the database. The analysis revealed that Xiaolin's learning efficiency had greatly improved and was currently evaluated as level 1. He possessed a passive talent that increased the learning efficiency of every attribute by 100%. In addition, his active skill granted him 1 replication opportunity. This ability allowed him to copy any ability equivalent to an F rank evaluation, with the copied effect lasting for 3 full minutes. However, talent abilities themselves could not be copied. Since no precedent for this talent existed and there were no current rules regarding it, the system announced that the very first possessor of this new talent would receive the privilege of naming it personally. In simple terms, Xiaolin understood that he could learn quickly and temporarily copy abilities. After thinking briefly, Xiaolin chose a very simple and direct name for the talent. He decided to call it Scholar Skill. The talent was officially entered into the system database as Scholar Skill Level 1. Its overall talent rank was then immediately assessed. It was evaluated as an SS rank talent. The scan completed successfully, yet even Qin Chuan remained completely unable to detect the existence of the Scholar Skill. Realizing that he secretly possessed an SS rank talent immediately made Xiaolin smile. At last, he finally possessed a true trump card for survival. One student suddenly questioned what exactly the lifespan value meant. He nervously pointed out that he only had 9 years remaining. If dying once deducted 10 years, then his lifespan would instantly fall to 0. He wondered whether the system was bugged. Qin Chuan immediately smacked the student on the head and called him a complete idiot. He confirmed that the student truly only had 9 years left. If he died even once, all of his remaining lifespan would be deducted completely, resulting in immediate death. However, Chuan mocked the others for believing that this was some kind of loss, and boldly declared that they had actually hit the jackpot instead. He explained that in the outside world, ordinary people naturally lost 1 year of life every single year, and if they encountered danger and died, then they simply stayed dead forever. But inside Dawn Academy, lifespan itself was treated as a valuable resource. It functioned as currency, could be earned back through completing missions, exchanged for points, and even extended through strengthening oneself. In other words, they could actually recover the years of life they had lost. After finishing his explanation, he asked whether everyone finally understood. The student could only groan in despair. Qin Chuan continued explaining that what the Academy truly offered them was a stepping stone capable of completely changing their destinies. The Academy could provide power, knowledge, wealth, and even an extended lifespan. As long as someone possessed enough credits and exchange points, then in theory, eternal life itself was not impossible. Gu Xiaoyue then asked whether this strange law only applied within the Academy, or if it existed universally everywhere. Qin Chuan answered that once someone officially became a student of the Academy, the law would automatically take effect. Therefore, as long as they remained on Earth, that law would continue applying to them at all times. Afterward, Qin Chuan declared that all the unnecessary nonsense was over and announced that the entrance examination would begin immediately. He ordered everyone to remain exactly where they were without moving. A system announcement suddenly echoed throughout the room, stating that teleportation preparations were underway and that the countdown had officially begun. The countdown started from 3, then dropped to 2, and the moment it reached 1, every single student transformed into streaks of purple light. Then they all disappeared completely. Qin Chuan immediately complained that the current batch of freshmen did not contain even a single truly talented student, which also meant he definitely would not receive a good evaluation score this time around. He cursed his terrible luck. Suddenly, someone loudly called out to him. A man smoking a cigar casually approached Qin Chuan. The man proudly bragged that Class 3 had managed to produce 2 talented freshmen. One had awakened an A-rank talent, while another possessed a B-rank talent. Then he smugly asked how things were going on Qin Chuan's side. Qin Chuan let out a tired sigh and complained that his class only had 1 genius, whose total initial stats barely exceeded 40 points. The man questioned what the point of high stats was when talent itself mattered far more than anything else. He brought up how Eagle Country supposedly produced a double S-rank freshman the previous year. Qinchuan immediately replied that the rumor had already been debunked a long time ago. The central database contained no record of any double S-rank talent at all, meaning such a thing simply did not exist in this world. He added that even a single S-rank talent was already considered unbelievably rare across the entire planet. Deep inside the Goblin forest, the students suddenly arrived in front of a cave while being assaulted by a horrible smell. Everyone immediately covered their noses in disgust. A screen suddenly appeared before Xiaolin. The notification informed him that the entrance examination had officially begun. The mandatory mission stated that they were currently deep inside a goblin nest and needed to escape the forest within 1 hour in order to reach the safe zone successfully. There were also 2 optional missions. The first required them to kill 5 goblins, while the second required them to defeat the Goblin King himself. Completing the mandatory mission would reward them with 10 credits and 100 exchange points. Completing optional mission 1 would grant an additional 10 credits, along with 200 exchange points. Meanwhile, clearing optional mission 2 would reward them with another 20 credits and 500 exchange points. At the same time, Xiaolin also received a pre-student exclusive gift pack. The gift pack contained 1 random weapon. Another system notification informed everyone that there would be no death penalty during the entrance test. The students immediately erupted into cheers after learning that their lifespan would not be deducted, even if they died. Xiaolin obtained a Novice Staff +1. Its magical attack rating was ranked F. The attached skill was called Energy Ball, which consumed mental power every time it was used. At the same time, he also unlocked the skill Basic Wand Mastery. Its current level was level 1, with 0 out of 100 experience points. Seeing experience points and weapon skills immediately reminded Xiaolin of the games he often played. Since that was the case, he decided to test the staff himself. Then, he unleashed an attack. The spell slammed into the wall and created a noticeable dent. The system immediately notified him that he had gained +2 experience points for Basic Wand Mastery. The skill remained at level 1, but the progress had now increased to 2 out of 100 points. Xiaolin instantly realized that he had been correct. Using weapons really did increase mastery experience. On top of that, he possessed the passive effect of the SS rank scholar talent. Because of this, his skill leveling speed would become twice as fast as everyone else's. However, he suddenly felt a sharp pain inside his head. Xiaolin quickly realized that his stats were simply too low. His mana bar was incredibly short, meaning he could not continuously cast magic many times in succession. Soon afterward, another warning appeared, stating that his current mana was insufficient and that he was temporarily unable to cast Energy Ball again. Meanwhile, another student excitedly shouted that he had unlocked Basic Heavy Sword Mastery, and that each successful swing granted 1 experience point. Xiaolin already understood that using a corresponding weapon would automatically unlock its related mastery skill. Based on that logic, if they casually practiced their weapons for a while, they could technically remain there and grind levels before completing the mission. However, wildly swinging weapons around endlessly was not actually useful. A certain combat standard still needed to be met before attacks granted experience points, and the stamina consumption from repeatedly attacking was enormous. The strict mission time limit clearly existed to prevent students from staying in one place and endlessly farming mastery experience. After thinking it through, Xiaolin concluded that switching to a physical weapon would likely maximize the advantage provided by his rapid leveling talent. At that moment, Gu Xiaoyue suddenly approached him and asked whether he wanted to switch weapons. Gu Xiaoyue admitted that although she had never really played games before, she still understood that magic-like abilities usually came with some sort of cost. Whether it was called mana or mental power, she believed it was most likely connected to the intelligence stat from their earlier physical assessment. She concluded that Xiaolin's staff suited her much better. At the same time, she pointed out that Xiaolin himself seemed to require a weapon that relied more on precision and mobility. In her opinion, the wand he currently possessed simply did not suit him at all. Xiaolin asked whether she was Gu Xiaoyue before introducing himself in return. Gu Xiaoyue then calmly asked whether he would be willing to exchange weapons with her. Xiaolin agreed, although he warned her that the wand required a certain degree of accuracy and careful aim in order to properly use its attacks. The system immediately notified Xiaolin that he had obtained a novice dagger. Its physical attack rating was ranked F. At the same time, he also unlocked the skill Basic Dagger Mastery. The skill was currently level 1, with progress sitting at 0 out of 100 points. After gripping the dagger, Xiaolin immediately remarked that it felt far more natural and easier for him to handle. At the same time, Xiaolin also realized that it would probably be safer to find another teammate if he wanted to smoothly pass the assessment. He was just about to invite Gu Xiaoyue to team up with him. However, the man wielding the heavy sword suddenly beat him to it. The man explained that he had already heard Gu Xiaoyue possess the highest stats in the entire class. He confidently proposed that she cooperate with him instead, while proudly boasting that his strength, constitution, and agility all exceeded 10 points. Then he pointed directly at Xiaolin and confidently declared that compared to someone like him, he would definitely pass the assessment if Gu Xiaoyue teamed up with him instead. The man introduced himself as Wang Dalin. Gu Xiaoyue quietly considered the offer for a moment. Then she flatly rejected him. The surrounding crowd instantly burst into laughter after seeing Wang Dalin get rejected so directly. Dalin immediately panicked in embarrassment. Then his gaze suddenly landed on Xiaolin. He instantly redirected all of his anger toward him. Wang Dalin openly admitted that seeing trash with single-digit stats like Xiaolin always irritated him. He mocked Xiaolin not only for being weak, but also for pretending to analyze weapons as if he actually knew what he was talking about. Xiaolin calmly argued that whether someone passed the test or not depended entirely on their own ability. Instead of wasting time picking pointless fights, he advised Wang Dalin to save his stamina for the mission ahead. Infuriated, Wang Dalin suddenly grabbed Xiaolin by the collar and loudly declared that he would personally show him what true ability looked like. Xiaolin only scoffed in response. Then he calmly told Wang Dalin that he would not get the chance. This immediately confused Wang Dalin. He had absolutely no idea that a goblin was already rushing toward him from directly behind. Wang Dalin was suddenly slashed directly across the face by the goblin. A long scar instantly appeared on his cheek. Without wasting even a second, the goblin charged toward him once again. However, this time, Wang Dalin was fully prepared and immediately swung his weapon, cutting the goblin cleanly in half. He muttered to himself that he had almost died just now. Dalin then furiously glared at Xiaolin for standing there and watching him make a fool of himself. However, he suddenly stopped talking after sensing something nearby. More goblins had arrived. The sight instantly caused the students to scream loudly in terror. One frightened woman wildly swung her sword around while screaming at the goblins to stay away from her. Meanwhile, another man was instantly taken down after a goblin scratched him across the chest. At that moment, Xiaolin finally realized that everything happening around him was completely real. He could smell the air, feel the pain, and even sense every object he touched. Aside from the scenery appearing somewhat virtual, every other sensation felt completely real. Xiaolin silently admitted that he had been far too naive earlier because this situation was absolutely nothing like playing video games. Ordinary people with zero combat experience were simply waiting to be slaughtered, even if they were carrying weapons. One of the students suddenly noticed that the goblins did not seem willing to attack anyone staying inside the cave. He quickly shouted for everyone to immediately retreat deeper inside. Then he rushed directly past Xiaolin. For the moment, the cave interior appeared relatively safe. However, Xiaolin knew that the safety would definitely not last forever. He noticed a system message labeled Cave Protection, which displayed a remaining time of 29 minutes and 38 seconds. Xiaolin forced himself to calm down. He absolutely refused to remain a helpless sitting duck. He immediately began swinging his dagger repeatedly, earning +2 experience points toward basic dagger mastery. Just as he expected, experience points were only granted when attacks met a proper standard and were executed with enough force. His strength was only level 2 while his constitution stood at level 3, placing him near the absolute bottom among the students. Because of that, he wanted to ensure that every single movement counted. Before the real battle began, he intended to familiarize himself with the dagger as much as possible while increasing his mastery experience. At that moment, another warning suddenly appeared, stating that the cave protection was close to expiring, with only 2 minutes and 38 seconds remaining. The students immediately panicked after realizing the cave would soon become unsafe as well. Someone desperately cried that the mission was practically impossible to complete. Another student complained that ranged weapons were nearly useless because they could barely hit anything, especially when the goblins moved so quickly. Meanwhile, Gu Xiaoyue quietly remained seated against the wall while silently observing everything around her. She eventually noticed that Xiaolin was still continuously swinging his dagger. At this point, Xiaolin already looked visibly exhausted. Gu Xiaoyue calmly told him that what he was doing was basically meaningless. According to her calculations, raising a weapon mastery skill to level 2 normally required around 1 full hour of training. Since the mission had a strict time limit, there simply was not enough time for shortcuts like that. Xiaolin immediately realized just how intelligent she truly was. Deep down, he actually agreed with her analysis completely. However, because of the bonus effect from Scholar Skill, Xiaolin's basic dagger mastery had already reached 98 out of 100 experience points. He was only 2 points away from reaching level 2. Xiaolin thanked her for the reminder and casually claimed that he's only trying to get used to the weapon. Then he asked whether she had learned anything useful after observing the goblins for so long. Gu Xiaoyue looked surprised that he had noticed she was studying them the entire time. Xiaolin compared the situation to gaming and explained that it was basically like reading a strategy guide before pulling a mob. Gu Xiaoyue calmly replied that she did not play games at all. Honestly, Xiaolin could already tell. Xiaolin then shared the observations he had gathered so far. According to him, the goblins possessed extremely weak attack and defense capabilities, most likely only around the F-rank standard. He also pointed out that their main weak points were their heads and hearts. As long as someone could overcome their fear, fighting a goblin one-on-one was actually not very difficult. He further explained that the mission itself was not truly hard. The real problem was that everyone was simply too terrified to fight back. Xiaolin stated that the moment people lost the courage to fight, they also lost every chance of winning. Gu Xiaoyue pointed out that the cave protection only lasted for a limited amount of time, meaning they would eventually have no choice but to leave the cave regardless. Xiaolin agreed and added that they could not spend the entire mission thinking only about escaping. As the two of them started walking toward the cave entrance, Wang Dalin immediately demanded to know where they were going. He once again urged Gu Xiaoyue to team up with him instead. Dalin confidently claimed that with both of their stats combined, they could definitely force their way toward the safe zone. Then he sneered at Xiaolin and mocked him for being useless, saying that bringing trash like him along would only get them all killed. Gu Xiaoyue calmly pointed out that simply reaching the safe zone was actually not difficult at all. Instead, the true challenge and greatest reward clearly came from defeating the Goblin King. Wang Dalin argued that the Goblin King was merely part of an optional mission. Besides, until now, nobody had even seen or heard anything related to the Goblin King at all. He shouted that they might not even survive the mandatory mission, yet Gu Xiaoyue was already talking about some hidden boss mission instead. Xiaolin calmly replied that the existence of the mission itself proved that completing it was definitely possible. He further pointed out that the Goblin King had likely not appeared yet because nobody had fulfilled the hidden trigger condition. According to him, the trigger could possibly be related to time, the remaining number of students alive, or the total number of goblins killed. Gu Xiaoyue quickly ruled out the possibility of it being time-based. She reasoned that the academy would never intentionally force students to fight a boss while only having a few minutes left remaining. She also dismissed the idea that it depended on the number of surviving students because far too few people were already left alive. That only left one final conclusion. The Goblin King would most likely appear after a certain percentage of goblins had been eliminated. At that moment, a terrified girl suddenly stopped them. She nervously asked whether they could simply focus on completing the mandatory mission instead of trying to fight the Goblin King. According to her, the goblins outside were already terrifying enough, and nobody even knew how powerful the Goblin King truly was. Xiaolin explained that there was absolutely no penalty for failing the entrance test, while succeeding could bring enormous rewards instead. If they simply chose to run away now, then they would basically be throwing away a huge opportunity for free. He asked everyone whether chances to earn credits with almost zero risk would really appear often after they officially entered the academy. Since they already had the opportunity to earn even more credits and exchange points, Xiaolin believed they should give it everything they had and take the risk while they still could. The surrounding students slowly began agreeing with his reasoning. Since they had very little to lose anyway, many of them started feeling that taking the gamble was actually worth it. Another student also reminded everyone that they no longer had many choices left because the cave itself was about to become unsafe. Wang Dalin clicked his tongue in annoyance. He could not believe that people were actually listening to someone as weak as Xiaolin. Dalin loudly declared that his own total stats were clearly superior, reaching a total of 32 points. Gu Xiaoyue calmly responded that 32 points were only slightly above the average standard. Wang Dalin immediately demanded to know how high her own stats were then. Gu Xiaoyue casually answered that her total stat value was 46 points. Then she calmly told Wang Dalin to shut up. Feeling everyone's eyes land on him, Wang Dalin instantly became embarrassed. Meanwhile, Xiaolin was completely shocked after learning that Gu Xiaoyue possessed 46 total points. That was over 5 times higher than his own stats. Gu Xiaoyue then turned toward the rest of the students and called out to everyone who wanted to pass the assessment while earning additional rewards. She ordered everyone to follow her commands from that moment onward. According to her, only by properly uniting together could they complete all the missions as efficiently as possible. She acknowledged that Wang Delin's stats were high enough for him to act as the frontline fighter responsible for drawing the goblins aggro. Wang Delin immediately agreed after hearing that role assignment. Afterward, Gu Xiaoyue ordered everyone possessing ranged weapons to stay in the back line and provide support attacks. She instructed the students to form simple groups of 3, properly cover one another, complete the goblin kill missions, and eliminate as many goblins as possible. Then, Gu Xiaoyue paused as she started thinking about what role Xiaolin should take. Xiaolin volunteered to take responsibility for roaming around the battlefield and finishing off goblins that were already heavily injured. Since his own stats were far too low, he understood that he needed to avoid direct combat as much as possible if he wanted to complete the mission successfully. This time, the students stepped out of the cave with far greater determination than before. Wang Delin immediately charged forward and wildly swung his swords at the goblins. Meanwhile, the archers quickly moved into position. However, most of their arrows completely missed the moving targets. One goblin suddenly lunged directly toward a frightened woman, but Xiaolin immediately rushed forward to help her. Then he cleanly killed the goblin with a precise strike. The woman hurriedly thanked him afterward. Deep down, Xiaolin knew that this was exactly the type of role he needed to play. He absolutely could not afford to become trapped in direct combat. Instead, he needed to conserve his stamina while carefully looking for opportunities to deliver precise finishing blows. As Xiaolin struck down another goblin, the system immediately announced that he had already slain 2 goblins. Moments later, another notification appeared and declared that he had defeated 3 goblins. Shortly afterward, the 4th goblin was eliminated as well. One of the nearby students eventually noticed that Xiaolin always attacked at the exact moment the monsters became weakest. Meanwhile, Wang Dalin simply assumed that Xiaolin was shamelessly scavenging kills every single time. However, Gu Xiaoyue understood that this was definitely not luck alone. She noticed that Xiaolin constantly avoided the goblins' lines of sight while accurately predicting their movements before attacking. Xiaolin then earned +6 experience points toward basic dagger mastery. Moments later, his mastery skill officially reached level 2. Deep down, Xiaolin felt extremely fortunate that he had previously purchased a fully immersive VR gaming setup and spent nearly 2 straight months obsessively playing combat games. Without that experience, he knew he would never have been capable of landing such perfectly timed finishing blows. The system then announced that the database scan had been completed and confirmed that Xiaolin was officially the very first freshman student to reach skill level 2. According to the Academy's freshman reward policy, he would now receive a free skill matching his current abilities. As a result, he unlocked Heavy Slash level 1. The learning requirement stated that the user needed at least 1 point in strength. The weapon requirement specified any melee physical weapon. According to the skill description, Heavy Slash delivered a powerful attack after gathering strength briefly beforehand, with the attack power directly depending on the user's current strength stat. However, a warning also explained that repeatedly using the skill would rapidly consume stamina. Because of this, the recommended usage interval was at least 1 minute between casts. Xiaolin felt genuinely happy after leveling up and unlocking a brand new skill. At this point, he only needed to kill 1 more goblin in order to complete optional mission 1. Almost as if responding to his thoughts, an injured goblin suddenly collapsed directly beside him. It was the final goblin he needed. Xiaolin immediately pierced its heart and officially completed optional mission 1. He finally let out a relieved sigh. Suddenly, all the surrounding goblins began disappearing. Wang Delin immediately asked what was happening. Then everyone suddenly heard a system announcement stating that the goblin population had been reduced by 1/3. The hidden conditions had officially been fulfilled, and the boss battle would now begin. The Goblin King finally appeared. The creature looked gigantic and terrifying, especially with its 2 massive sharp horns and rows of razor-like teeth. The Goblin King suddenly inhaled deeply. Then it unleashed a deafening roar. The terrifying sound waves instantly assaulted the students, making it feel as though their eardrums were about to burst apart. At that moment, everyone finally understood the true power of the Goblin King. This was the dungeon boss they actually needed to face. Xiaolin quickly noticed that all the ordinary goblins around them had completely disappeared. The students were horrified after seeing that the monster's health bar looked even longer than their own lifespans. Terrified, one student desperately questioned how they were even supposed to fight something like that. The frightened student immediately shouted that he quit and that everyone else could fight the monster themselves. Xiaolin instantly yelled at him not to recklessly run around. At that exact moment, Xiaolin suddenly realized something important about goblins. Their field of vision was actually extremely narrow. However, their senses of smell and hearing were unbelievably sharp. He instantly understood that the fleeing student's actions would completely attract the Goblin King's attention. Meanwhile, Wang Delin loudly questioned what everyone was even afraid of. He confidently declared that as long as they overwhelmed the enemy with numbers, they could simply swarm the Goblin King and kill it through brute force. Then he recklessly charged straight toward the boss. The Goblin King instantly sensed his presence. Before Wang Dalin could even land an attack, the Goblin King struck him first. Wang Dalin crashed violently into the ground with tremendous force. He screamed horribly from the pain. Then his body suddenly disappeared completely. The students instantly descended into chaos after witnessing him get killed so effortlessly. Everyone began running around wildly in panic. One male student even screamed hysterically while trying to escape. The Goblin King casually stepped on him and crushed him instantly. Meanwhile, several other students were smashed away by the giant bat, wielded by the monster. One woman was violently thrown through the air. She crashed heavily against the ground and immediately became unable to stand back up. The Goblin King then raised its foot, preparing to crush her as well. However, a magical attack suddenly struck the monster. Its health bar finally dropped slightly. Gu Xiaoyue clicked her tongue in frustration after realizing that she had missed the perfect shot. She quickly observed that attacks landing on the goblin's limbs only dealt half damage, therefore they absolutely needed to target the vital points instead. According to Gu Xiaoyu's original strategy, the melee fighters were supposed to hold the Goblin King in place, while the ranged attackers continuously dealt damage safely from behind. As long as everyone properly cooperated, she believed they should have been capable of defeating the boss before running out of mental power. But now, their entire formation had completely collapsed. At that moment, Gu Xiaoyue suddenly realized something. Her original plan had been far too idealistic. The Goblin King suddenly turned toward her and prepared to attack. Someone suddenly shouted at her, calling her an idiot for standing there frozen. The voice immediately snapped her back to reality. Xiaolin suddenly rushed forward and slashed at the Goblin King, barely managing to cut off a few strands of its hair. The Goblin King instantly turned around. Then it swung its giant bat directly toward Xiaolin. Xiaolin narrowly managed to evade the Goblin King's attack while carefully observing its movements at the same time. During the exchange, he quickly discovered that the monster's attack pattern always prioritized targeting whoever stood closest to it first. At the same time, all the remaining ordinary goblins had already disappeared completely, meaning they now only needed to focus on defeating the Goblin King itself. Xiaolin then noticed the female archer hiding nervously behind a nearby tree. He immediately told her not to panic. According to his plan, she only needed to continuously attract the Goblin King's attention, maintain a safe distance, and harass the boss from afar in order to create short openings. The frightened woman nervously replied that she would try her best. Xiaolin then shouted toward Gu Xiaoyue, reminding her that her attack power was strong enough to gradually wear down the monster's health bar. The two women quickly adjusted their aim. Then they simultaneously launched their attacks toward the Goblin King. The monster's health bar immediately dropped even further. The Goblin King suddenly dropped its weapon. The female archer became excited after realizing that their strategy was actually working. Xiaolin immediately instructed them to continue the assault. The Goblin King suddenly released another furious roar. Then it raised both of its massive arms high into the air. A moment later, it slammed them violently into the ground, causing the earth around them to shatter apart. Xiaolin immediately rushed forward in an attempt to save the female archer. However, she was struck directly by a massive falling rock and instantly killed. The Goblin King patiently waited for the debris and dust to settle. Meanwhile, Xiaolin and Gu Xiaoyue cautiously observed the monster from a distance. Gu Xiaoyue quietly told Xiaolin that only the two of them remained alive now. She nervously asked whether they still had any chance left of winning at all. Xiaolin calmly asked whether she still possessed enough magic power remaining to fire a few more energy blasts. Gu Xiaoyue replied that she could probably cast 2 more attacks at most. Xiaolin immediately responded that it would be enough. He explained that direct hits to the head dealt extremely high damage, meaning Gu Xiaoyu only needed to successfully strike the Goblin King's head a single time. However, Gu Xiaoyu replied that the monster moved far too quickly and that her accuracy simply was not good enough to guarantee a headshot. Xiaolin suddenly grinned and calmly told her that he would personally make the Goblin King stop moving. At that exact moment, Xiaolin activated Scholar skill. The system immediately detected the skill Shockwave. Shockwave was an F-rank skill capable of dealing impact damage to all targets within a 5-meter radius, while also applying a stun effect lasting 3 full seconds. Xiaolin bitterly reflected on how his talent had always seemed completely useless in the past. Because of that, people constantly treated him like worthless trash. But now, it was finally his turn to step onto the battlefield himself. The copied skill, Shockwave, activated successfully. The system then announced that Shockwave's cooldown had been set to 30 seconds, while the copied effect itself would remain active for 3 minutes. Xiaolin immediately charged straight toward the Goblin King. During the fight, he had already observed that the Goblin King was preparing to release another Shockwave attack. The Goblin King activated its Shockwave by smashing both hands onto the ground, while the copied version, Xiaolin possessed, was activated through striking with a weapon instead. Because of the massive height difference between them, Xiaolin realized that his own skill activation speed would definitely be faster than the Goblin King's attack. Xiaolin immediately activated Copy Shockwave F rank. The Goblin King's massive hands violently collided against Xiaolin's dagger. His entire plan was to interrupt the monster's skill activation completely. The Goblin King was instantly pushed backward. For the very first time, the monster actually looked surprised. Xiaolin immediately realized that his assumption had been correct. However, Shockwave could not be spammed continuously because it possessed a 30-second cooldown timer. A system screen displayed that the skill still had 22 seconds remaining before it could be used again. The monster's attack was about to hit our MC, but suddenly, something hit it. It was a magic energy, and it made the monster lose more health points. That attack was from our #1 waifu. Gu Xiaoyue admitted that she could not continue fighting for much longer because she only had enough mental power remaining for one final shot. She still could not believe that Xiaolin had actually managed to interrupt the Goblin King's skill, despite possessing such low stats. Deep down, she wondered how he had possibly accomplished something like that. The Goblin King suddenly grabbed a gigantic boulder. At that moment, Shockwave still had 16 seconds left on cooldown. Xiaolin immediately realized that because he stood too close to the monster, completely dodging the attack was impossible. Since that was the case, he decided not to dodge at all. The massive boulder slammed directly into him. Gu Xiaoyue immediately screamed Xiaolin's name in panic. One of Xiaolin's arms was completely destroyed by the impact, but he still replied that he was fine. Meanwhile, the cooldown timer displayed 10 seconds remaining. The Goblin King immediately attempted another attack afterward. Xiaolin quickly realized that the attack would lose effectiveness if he stayed directly underneath the monster's center of gravity, so he immediately rushed beneath it instead. At that point, only 3 seconds remained on Shockwave's cooldown. The moment Xiaolin got into position, the cooldown finally completed. He instantly activated the skill again. The Goblin King was directly caught within the range of the Shockwave attack. Xiaolin immediately shouted the signal for Gu Xiaoyu to attack. Without hesitation, Gu Xiaoyu unleashed a concentrated magical beam straight toward the Goblin King's head. The left side of the Goblin King's skull instantly exploded apart as its health bar was completely depleted. The system immediately announced that the Goblin King had been successfully defeated. As a result, Optional Mission 2 had officially been completed. Xiaolin slowly dropped his dagger afterward. As his body collapsed, Gu Xiaoyue immediately rushed toward him. Meanwhile, Xiaolin weakly thought about the mandatory mission involving the safe zone. Before finally closing his eyes, the very last thing he saw was Gu Xiaoyue's worried expression. Deep down, he bitterly thought about how he still failed to complete the mission in the end. Meanwhile, the academy professors had already gathered together. One instructor asked whether everyone had already reviewed the results of their freshman entrance tests. He then announced that as the Minister of Admissions, he would personally provide the official summary of this year's results. The minister explained that Dawn Academy had enrolled a total of 1,360 freshmen across 12 different classes. He then revealed the overall entrance examination evaluations. A total of 250 students received Rank D evaluations, 200 students achieved Rank C, 83 students earned Rank B, and 52 students managed to obtain Rank A. Then he revealed the most shocking result of all. Only 15 students across the entire academy had managed to obtain an S rank evaluation. The instructors were immediately surprised because obtaining an S rank required students to complete all 3 missions while surviving the examination itself. Another instructor questioned whether this year's freshman batch was simply unusually monstrous and packed with talented students. One instructor proudly declared that his class had already produced 2 talented students. Meanwhile, a blonde-haired woman smugly added that her own class also produced 2 talented students, although both only achieved B-rank evaluations. The minister confirmed that among all the freshmen this year, there were exactly 13 officially recognized talented students. According to him, this was the highest quality freshman batch Dawn Academy had seen in the last 10 years. He then thanked all the instructors for their hard work. Meanwhile, Qin Chuan grumbled bitterly that his class must have simply been unlucky since Class 9 had apparently failed to produce even a single talented student. However, the minister calmly replied that although Class 9 had failed to reach the safe zone requirement collectively, they had still managed to create 2 entirely new records in the Academy's history. Qin Chuan immediately reacted in shock. The minister explained that the first record involved a single class, simultaneously producing 2 officially recognized talented students who both achieved S-rank evaluations during the same entrance test. As for the second record, he announced that someone had broken the highest intelligence stat ever recorded for a freshman since the founding of Dawn Academy itself. Then he casually added that another student had also broken the Academy's all-time record for the lowest comprehensive stat total. The minister then pointed out that what made the entire situation even more unbelievable was that both completely opposite records belonged to 2 students from the exact same Class 9. Furthermore, both students still managed to achieve S-rank evaluations regardless. The situation was so absurdly unique that it had even alarmed the Academy principal personally. At that moment, the system announced that the examination had officially ended and that teleportation preparations were now underway. The surviving students immediately felt overwhelming relief after realizing they were still alive. A system screen then appeared before Xiaolin, displaying his final evaluation results. He had successfully completed all 3 missions, including reaching the safe zone, killing 5 goblins, and defeating the Goblin King. His final comprehensive evaluation was officially rated as S rank. As rewards, he received 40 credits and 800 exchange points. Xiaolin then recalled that the mandatory mission must have been completed while he was unconscious earlier. He quietly wondered whether Gu Xiaoyue had personally carried him to the safe zone after he blacked out. At that moment, the female archer suddenly approached him. She sincerely thanked Xiaolin, because without his help she believed she never would have achieved an A-rank evaluation. The archer admitted that she had been too weak and useless during the battle. In the end, she had still died from the after effects of the Goblin King's shockwave attack. She then curiously asked whether Xiaolin and Gu Xiaoyue had ultimately succeeded in defeating the Goblin King afterward. Xiaolin calmly replied that they had succeeded. Hearing that immediately made the female archer happy. She admitted that she already knew the 2 of them were capable of pulling it off. Meanwhile, Wang Dalin openly expressed his dissatisfaction. He bitterly claimed that if Xiaolin had not relied entirely on Gu Xiaoyu's protection, then someone as weak as him would have died hundreds of times already. Suddenly, Gu Xiaoyu quietly walked toward Xiaolin. She stated that she wanted to privately discuss the recent battle with him. Xiaolin and Gu Xiaoyue quietly walked into the hallway together. Xiaolin sincerely thanked her for what she had done earlier at the safe zone. Gu Xiaoyue calmly admitted that bringing him there had been extremely beneficial because it maximized the overall mission rewards. She explained that without Xiaolin interrupting the Goblin King's skill and creating that crucial opening, she never would have been able to land the final attack successfully. At that moment, Xiaolin realized once again just how incredibly calculating and analytical she truly was. Gu Xiaoyue then added that based on Xiaolin's current stat values, interrupting a boss monster's skill should theoretically have been completely impossible. However, she also stated that everyone possessed their own secrets, and since she had no intention of prying into his, she was willing to keep his secret hidden. Xiaolin quietly thanked her for that. Afterward, Gu Xiaoyue revealed that she had already discovered a built-in smart brain system inside the student nameplate, which also possessed communication functions. She suggested that the 2 of them add each other as friends, so contacting one another later would become more convenient. Xiaolin agreed immediately. Gu Xiaoyue instructed him to silently recite the words "smart brain" in his mind, which would automatically open the system's basic control panel. The 2 activated it simultaneously. A system panel instantly appeared before Xiaolin, displaying his basic information. It showed that he currently possessed 40 credits, 800 exchange points, and base stats of 2 strength, 2 agility, 2 intelligence, and 3 constitution. Gu Xiaoyue then asked for his student ID number, and Xiaolin informed her that his ID was 201235. A notification immediately appeared on Xiaolin's panel, informing him that he had received a friend request from Gu Xiaoyue, whose student ID was 201107. Xiaolin accepted the request without hesitation. Meanwhile, Qin Chuan instructed all students who received an F-rank evaluation during the entrance examination to immediately head toward the entrance area and assemble there. As for everyone else, they were instructed to open the Smart Brain Map navigation system and proceed directly toward the central playground. At that moment, Qin Chuan suddenly noticed Gu Xiaoyue. Then he told her to come with him for a moment. Meanwhile, Xiaolin opened his map and discovered that in order to reach the playground, students first needed to pass through the courtyard connected to the public classroom area. As he walked, Xiaolin quietly wondered whether Qin Chuan had specifically called Gu Xiaoyu over because of her S-rank evaluation. Or if perhaps he had noticed something else entirely. At the central playground, Xiaolin noticed an enormous crowd already gathered there. He could not help but wonder whether so many people suddenly disappearing from Earth at the same time would eventually create massive chaos in the outside world. Soon afterward, Xiaolin spotted Gu Xiaoyue and immediately asked whether everything was all right. Gu Xiaoyue calmly assured him that she had not revealed anything she should not have. Suddenly, the crowd heard someone loudly ordering everyone to make way. The students were instructed to stand properly in formation instead of carelessly crowding together. A moment later, two men escorted someone toward the front stage area. The blue-haired student standing there introduced himself as the president of the Academy's Student Council before formally welcoming all the new students. He then announced that the Academy principal had apparently been delayed because of certain matters and would arrive somewhat later. Therefore, he would temporarily welcome everyone on behalf of the Academy instead. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed throughout the entire sky. Every single person instinctively looked upward. Then they all froze in complete shock after seeing what appeared above them. It was a dragon. Xiaolin could instantly tell that this was not some fake creature or illusion. It was a genuine, 100% authentic dragon. The overwhelming pressure immediately caused Xiaolin's entire body to freeze in fear. The fear brought by the dragon was completely instinctive and psychological in nature. Even Gu Xiaoyue was visibly affected by it. The massive dragon slowly descended and landed before the crowd. An old man stepped forward and apologized to everyone, explaining that he had been delayed because he needed to handle some matters along the way. That was the reason he had nearly arrived late. This elderly man was none other than the principal of Dawn Academy. The student council president jokingly remarked that the principal's entrance had been a little too grand. The principal immediately shouted back that it was not like he deliberately rode the giant lizard there just to show off. He explained that he'd rushed back from an extremely distant location, and because time had been tight, riding the creature was simply the fastest available method of transportation. However, he never expected the dragon to start acting wildly the moment it arrived. It had even dared to scare his students. The principal then loudly warned the dragon that if it dared to mess around again next time, he would personally skin it alive. Meanwhile, Xiaolin became extremely wary of the principal because he realized that this man was likely the only person in the academy with the authority to inspect the hidden scholar talent directly. The principal then announced that he'd already reviewed the entrance examination results of the current freshman batch and found their overall talents fairly impressive. Then he suddenly looked directly towards someone within the crowd. Xiaolin instinctively flinched. The principal casually cast an amplification spell before continuing his speech. He remarked that according to normal tradition, he should have first introduced himself properly. However, he already understood that none of the freshmen currently cared about his name at all. He knew that many of them had been invited into the academy under extremely confusing or even unpleasant circumstances, which naturally left them unhappy and dissatisfied. The principal then jokingly stated that anyone dissatisfied with the situation was free to complain directly to the Ministry of Admissions Department, since those idiots were the ones who insisted on delivering admission letters during ungodly hours in the middle of the night. The students immediately burst into laughter after hearing that. The principal explained that because of those complaints, a brand new regulation had eventually been established requiring all future admissions to happen during daytime hours instead. Apparently, terrifying people in the middle of the night had turned out to be an absolutely terrible idea. After finishing the jokes, the principal's expression gradually became more serious. He then addressed the two biggest questions currently on every student's mind: who exactly they were and what they would be expected to do from now on. The principal called out to every single person who had come from the old world and ordered them to listen carefully. Then he solemnly declared that all of them were colonists. The principal explained that this world was called Planet Norma, also known as the New World. The Academy's sole purpose was to cultivate the greatest and most outstanding pioneer colonist humanity could produce. He added that Norma was the new world they would eventually enter, fight for, and conquer. It was also destined to become humanity's future territory. The principal declared that the ordinary, step-by-step lives they once knew had already ended the very moment they opened their admission letters. From that day onward, some among them would eventually rise to become great generals capable of commanding massive armies while conquering and expanding territories. Perhaps among them, there would also emerge powerful Grand Magisters who would dedicate themselves to uncovering the truth of the world while wielding the very laws of nature itself. The principal further proclaimed that some students would eventually become rulers and leaders responsible for creating the laws governing the new world itself. He loudly declared that strength, knowledge, authority, power, and even eternal life all awaited them in the future. Then he boldly announced that every treasure hidden within the new world would eventually open its doors to them as well. Afterward, the principal suddenly announced the implementation of a brand new academy rule. He explained that according to the old regulations, freshman students had always been strictly forbidden from setting foot inside the new world. However, beginning with their current batch, the top 3 students from every first-term comprehensive examination would receive the qualification to enter the new world early. The student council president immediately warned the principal that the matter directly concerned the safety of the freshmen and advised him to reconsider the decision carefully. The principal immediately glared directly at him. The student council president instantly admitted that he had misspoken. The principal then casually declared that the meeting was officially adjourned. Meanwhile, Xiaolin quietly noticed that the student council president's reaction earlier had been strangely extreme, making him wonder whether the newly announced rule contained some sort of hidden danger or problem. However, after thinking briefly, Xiaolin decided that his highest priority for now was simply fully utilizing every academy resource available in order to strengthen himself as quickly as possible. At that exact moment, someone suddenly called out to him. It was Qin Chuan. Xiaolin immediately asked what he needed from him. Qin Chuan explained that according to academy rules, the student with the highest performance during the entrance examination would automatically become the class monitor. However, since Gu Xiaoyue had unexpectedly rejected the position, Xiaolin became confused. Qin Chuan then bluntly declared that the role now automatically defaulted to him instead. He explained that becoming class monitor came with extra credits, increased resource quotas, and several special academy privileges. He emphasized that benefits like those could easily become life-saving opportunities for someone ranked dead last like Xiaolin. Qin Chuan further added that the class monitor position would be officially re-elected after the first comprehensive examination 3 months later. By then, Xiaolin might never receive another opportunity like this again, even if he wanted it. At that moment, a system notification suddenly appeared before Xiaolin, informing him that he had officially been appointed as the acting class monitor of freshman year class 7. Qin Chuan then told him that the smart brain system would automatically send over the class monitor manual and instructed Xiaolin to simply read through it himself later. Meanwhile, Xiaolin quietly wondered exactly what kind of privileges came with the position. At the student dormitory, a woman lazily explained that the dormitory doors would automatically lock at 7 p.m. and reopen again at 6 a.m. every morning. She added that credits would be deducted from any student who stayed outside all night before asking whether he understood the rules. However, her bored attitude instantly changed after she suddenly noticed something. The woman immediately became excited after learning that Xiaolin was the class monitor from the academy's newest batch of freshmen. She enthusiastically told him that he was incredible. Xiaolin awkwardly explained that he was only the acting class monitor and that he had basically been forced into accepting the position. The woman immediately told him not to be so modest because anyone capable of becoming class monitor definitely could not be an ordinary student. The senior female student then personally guided him so he could collect his room key and academy supplies. Xiaolin quietly noticed the dramatic change in her attitude. She handed him a school uniform before explaining that the academy uniforms were divided according to grade colors. Sophomore students wore blue uniforms, while freshman students wore green. Afterward, she personally led Xiaolin toward his dormitory room. To his surprise, it was actually an exclusive single room reserved specifically for the acting class monitor position, while ordinary freshman students were only assigned double rooms. The senior student reminded Xiaolin never to lose his identity nameplate because it was required for dormitory access, purchases, class sign-ins, and various academy functions. She introduced herself as Zhang Tingting before suggesting that they add each other as friend through Smart Brain. She also told Xiaolin that if there was ever anything about classes or the academy he failed to understand, he could ask her directly. Before leaving, Zhang Tingting reminded him to choose his courses carefully. Xiaolin politely said goodbye to her. After she left, Xiaolin quietly realized the senior student had obviously become much more enthusiastic the moment she discovered he's the acting class monitor. He suspected that this reaction was directly related to the privileges Qinchuan had mentioned earlier. At the same time, Xiaolin also realized that the class hierarchy within the academy was extremely severe, and everything there ultimately depended on personal strength. Because of that, he decided to deal with the course selection issue first. He quickly opened the course selection panel. The interface listed all available courses. The basic combat courses included basic swordsmanship, basic sabermanship, basic boxing, basic archery, and basic meditation. Meanwhile, the secondary stat courses included basic taijutsu, basic perception, basic balance, basic focus, basic resilience, basic movement, basic parry, and basic dodge. The compulsory courses included general history of the Norma world, Norma lingua franca, and Norma geography. Xiaolin immediately felt overwhelmed after seeing the enormous list of options. Xiaolin carefully read through the rules and learned that all compulsory courses had to be taken without exception. In addition, each student also needed to select one primary combat course along with 3 secondary stat courses. He forced himself to calm down because despite the large number of available classes, he still possessed the scholar talent. At the moment, his biggest weakness was his terrible stats, meaning he needed to improve them as quickly as possible. The passive double learning efficiency provided by scholar talent was an unbelievable advantage that he absolutely could not afford to waste. After carefully considering everything, Xiaolin decided to choose magic swordsmanship as his primary combat course because it was relatively easy to learn while also being highly versatile. At the same time, he believed that basic taijutsu would improve his survivability, while basic meditation could strengthen his mental power and concentration. In the end, Xiaolin finalized his selected courses as basic swordsmanship, basic taijutsu, basic movement, basic meditation, general history of the Norma world, Norma geography, and Norma lingua franca. He carefully planned his choices because he fully understood that in this world, everything ultimately revolved around strength. The next day, inside the basic swordsmanship training grounds, the sound of repeated strikes continuously echoed throughout the room. The person training there was Xiaolin. He repeatedly struck a wooden practice pole while steadily earning proficiency points for basic swordsmanship. Through training, Xiaolin realized that just like daggers, the true power behind a longsword slash originated from the waist rather than the wrist itself. At the same time, the passive effect of scholar talent remained active, continuously increasing his learning efficiency by 100%. Xiaolin believed that as long as he fully grasped the key principles behind swordsmanship, his attack movements could become even faster and more efficient. Suddenly, a system notification appeared and announced that basic swordsmanship had leveled up. His current basic swordsmanship skill had now officially reached level 3, with 12 out of 1,000 proficiency points completed toward the next level. At the same time, his strength stat also increased from 2 to 3. Xiaolin quickly realized that raising the skill from level 1 to level 2 had only taken him around 30 minutes, while progressing from level 2 to level 3 required approximately 1 hour. Even so, his overall training speed was still twice as fast compared to ordinary students. At that moment, Xiaolin fully concluded that increasing skill proficiency directly drove the growth of his basic stats. This confirmed that his earlier line of thinking had been completely correct. However, after training non-stop, Xiaolin finally collapsed onto the ground while muttering that his arms felt like they were about to fall off entirely. At that moment, someone nearby coldly remarked that the foundation of this year's freshmen was even worse than she had originally imagined. She could not believe students that week actually dared to choose her swordsmanship course. The instructor then loudly warned the entire class that anyone whose basic swordsmanship proficiency failed to reach level 3 should completely forget about ever completing the course successfully. A system panel identified her as Chung Na, a third-year student serving as the substitute instructor for basic swordsmanship. The students immediately cried out in despair while responding yes to her warning. One student miserably wailed that if he had known the class would be this brutal earlier, he never would have selected swordsmanship at all because the instructor was basically a devil. Another student complained that upgrading basic swordsmanship from level 1 to level 2 already required non-stop practice for 3 or 4 straight hours. She simply could not understand how the academy expected them to progress further when they were not even superhuman. At that moment, Xiaolin suddenly approached Chengna directly. Then he calmly informed her that his basic swordsmanship had already reached the required level 3 proficiency. After checking the schedule within the course selection system, he realized that his next class, Basic Meditation, was about to begin soon. Therefore, he politely asked whether he could leave the training grounds early. Chung-na immediately glared directly at him. She openly doubted whether he was telling the truth at all. According to her, it was only the very first day of class, yet Xiaolin was already trying to skip out early. Xiaolin himself could hardly believe how intense her reaction was. Na called out Lin's name and mockingly referred to him as the lucky guy with single-digit stats who had leached off his teammates to earn an S-rank evaluation in the exam. She coldly remarked that if he wanted to skip class, he should at least come up with a more believable excuse. Deep down, she felt offended. He was acting as if it were her first day teaching freshmen. Lin replied that the data panel could prove it, and if she did not believe him, she could check it herself. Chung-na scoffed. Suddenly, a warning panel appeared, announcing that she had activated high-level teaching permissions. A training simulation arena was about to open, and the students were told to prepare themselves. The ground trembled and Lin was caught off guard. She suggested that instead of staring at boring data, it was better to see actual combat firsthand. The system welcomed them to the all-system combat simulation arena. Na explained that this was a place where the Academy had stripped away some of the underlying laws of the Norma world. She revealed that the Academy had spent astronomical resources to create the ultimate training space. She then assured Lin that he would not truly die inside it. However, she warned him that every sensation he experienced in the arena would feel completely real. Opening the simulation arena required a massive amount of exchange points, and she had paid a heavy price to activate it. She told Lin that since he claimed his basic swordsmanship had already reached level 3, he should prove it through actual combat. She explained that the strength of the skeleton soldiers was equal to the goblins from the novice exam. As long as Lin could clear the dungeon, she would allow him to leave class early. She would even grant him the privilege of leaving class early in the future as well. A system notification announced that the Undead dungeon had been opened. Lin had to clear it either by surviving for 40 minutes or by killing 20 skeleton soldiers. Lin could not believe that, just to verify a freshman's level, she had opened this kind of dungeon. It made him think she was a complete maniac. Lin drew his fine iron dagger. He considered 2 ways to clear the challenge, either stall for time or kill. He charged at an undead skeleton and threw it off balance. Then he drove his dagger into its skull. 1 out of 20 skeleton soldiers had been slain. By targeting the skeleton soldier's weak points, he only needed 2 strikes to bring one down. That meant killing 20 skeleton soldiers would require 40 strikes in total. Chung-na could not believe he had actually charged in. She had expected him to be so terrified that he would immediately apologize and beg her to close the dungeon. Instead, she noticed that his footwork, force generation, and slashing angles were all surprisingly solid. On top of that, his movements were clean, and his judgment during combat was remarkably accurate. She admitted that he was far better than those idiots who only knew how to swing their weapons wildly. But the downside was that his basic stats were simply too low. She realized that Lin might have enrolled in both swordsmanship and meditation at the same time because he wanted to improve his stats. By that point, Lin had already completed 13 solo kills. That alone was a miracle. He still had 28 minutes remaining. Suddenly, he was struck from behind. Deep down, she wanted him to face reality. She hoped he would simply listen obediently. Lin activated Heavy Slash. In a single strike, he cut down 3 undead skeletons. Na's jaw dropped. She wondered where he had learned a skill like that. Lin continued, cutting through the undead skeletons, eventually bringing down 19 of them. Then, he stabbed the last skeleton soldier. The total number slain had reached 20 out of 20. After that, he began breathing heavily. He informed Na that he had completed her requirement. Then he fainted. Na wondered what was wrong with him. For a freshman to receive both an S rank and an A rank evaluation in the entrance exam, she believed it could not have been pure luck. At the student council office, a green-haired female student reported to the president that the files of all freshmen who had received S rank and A rank evaluations in the entrance exam had already been sorted out. The president told her that she had done well and instructed her to leave the files there. However, she suggested taking a look at one particular schedule. He asked what the issue was. She explained that one freshman's course selection was extremely bizarre. She pointed out that a freshman named Xiaolin had selected every available course. The president could hardly believe it. At Dawn Academy Infirmary at 12:04 p.m., Na insisted that it was not as if she had intentionally pushed Lin to that state. She had no idea that the student council president needed Lin, since her only focus had been teaching her class. He pointed out that it was not the first time she had treated a freshman like that. She asked whether he had a problem with her teaching methods. He clarified that he was only saying there was no need for her to be so extreme. She argued that it was precisely because they were freshmen that she had to be stricter with them. In her view, showing mercy now would only hurt them later. He did not respond. She turned away. Suddenly, Lin let out a groan. The student council president sighed in relief. He was finally awake. Lin asked if he was in the infirmary. The president confirmed it and explained that the academy's infirmary was fully equipped. He explained that, unlike a normal dungeon, most people did not leave the holographic simulation arena in good condition. Lin had simply pushed himself too far and collapsed from stamina exhaustion. He then asked how he was feeling. Lin replied that he felt much better, although his muscles were still a little sore. The president looked relieved and assured him that he would recover completely after some rest. After that, he got straight to the point. He asked Na to leave because he needed to speak with Lin alone. She immediately demanded to know why she had to leave. That only made her even angrier. So she stormed out. But before leaving, she called Lin a brat. Then she declared that she was not the type of person to go back on her word. Since he had completed the challenge, he officially had permission to leave class early. She also warned him that trying to cultivate both magic and martial arts at the same time rarely ended well. If he insisted on doing it, he would be completely on his own. With that, she slammed the door behind her. Lin smiled, thinking that she did not seem like the female T-Rex everyone made her out to be. The president cleared his throat and suggested they get down to business. He asked Lin whether he had not read the freshman handbook, which clearly explained the dangers of taking too many courses at once. He then explained that swordsmanship, movement, and taijutsu all belonged to the physical system, while meditation, spells, perception, and similar disciplines belonged to the magic system. The two systems followed entirely different growth paths. He added that dual cultivation of magic and martial arts had advantages during the freshman stage because it allowed students to handle a wider variety of combat situations. However, as their studies advanced, each system would branch into countless specialized paths. By their sophomore or junior year, students pursuing dual cultivation would need to invest 3 times, or even 6 to 7 times, more time and effort than everyone else. Lin replied that he already knew that. He compared the course system to a tree. The farther one progressed, the more branches would appear, and those branches would continue splitting into even finer paths. He understood that cultivating both magic and martial arts would require far more effort than normal. Even so, he still wanted to try. Deep down, he believed that with the scholar bonus, he could absolutely make it work. The president could hardly believe what he was hearing. Suddenly, he received a message from the principal. He groaned the moment he read it. Since the principal had already approved Lin's course selection, he could not object any further. However, Lin's schedule would still need to be optimized and adjusted. A new timetable would be sent to his smart brain by the following morning. After saying that, he advised Lin to get some proper rest. Lin thanked him. Lin found the timing of the message suspicious. It felt as though someone was constantly watching him. He wondered whether it was because of his SS rank talent, or if there was another reason entirely. At sunset, in the principal's office, someone asked the principal why he was pouting. It was the Dawn Academy Central Main Control System. She appeared as a white-haired girl. She asked him what had happened. Upon seeing her form, he remarked that she seemed to have become obsessed with Blue Star's anime culture. The floating spirit replied that her appearance was quite popular on Blue Star. She even suggested that it could help attract new freshmen to the academy. The principal reminded her that she was the academy's central smart brain, and that only a very small number of people possessed the authority to contact her directly. She complained that the principal was already over 100 years old, yet remained unbelievably boring. She remarked that this batch of freshmen was actually quite impressive, so she could not understand why the principal seemed dissatisfied. She pointed out that there was even a student with a double SS rank talent. He explained that the combined stats of a normal person generally totaled around 10 points. The academy's admission standard required a total stat value above 20 points. As for Xiaolin, he only had 9 points, making him an exceptionally ordinary person by comparison. She asked what was wrong with that. He explained that talents could only be tested after enrollment. In other words, it should have been completely impossible for Lin to receive an admission letter in the first place. She suggested that the admissions department might have simply made a mistake and accidentally discovered a genius through sheer luck. But the principal believed that this was exactly where the real problem began. When he had recently accessed the records, there was absolutely no admission record for Lin. The current enrollment consisted of a total of 1,360 students. However, the system reported that only 1,359 admission letters with valid records existed in the central database. Since the founding of Dawn Academy, something like this had never happened before. Because of that, the principal pointed out that the Academy's main control program should know exactly what was going on. She confirmed that there was no mistake. A total of 1,360 admission letters had indeed been issued to that year's freshmen. The principal then requested that the system pull up Xiaolin's admission letter for inspection. She would have loved to cooperate, but he did not actually possess the authority required to view that admission letter. The principal was stunned. He found it hard to believe that it was only an admission letter, yet even he, the principal, lacked the authority to access it. She confirmed that was the case and admitted that she was just as surprised. His brows furrowed. In the end, he could only let out a defeated sigh and decide to drop the matter. He then instructed the system to use the highest level of authority available to him to back up and encrypt all freshman admission letters from that year, except for those protected by special permissions. He expected that would not be a problem. She replied that it would not. She then told him to wait while she began the encryption process. The central main control system reported that all 1,359 operable admission letters issued to that year's freshmen had been successfully encrypted. Only the principal and individuals with higher authority could view or modify them. As for the one remaining file protected by special permissions, it had been encrypted while maintaining its original maximum level protection status. She asked whether he truly did not want to know who the owner of the missing admission letter was. He replied that he did not. He then revealed that he would be returning to the New World tomorrow. After he left, he did not want too many unrelated people interfering with that child's growth. He entrusted the Academy's affairs to her and asked her to take extra care of the child. The next day, at the cafeteria, Ting was surprised to learn that it was Lin who had fainted after just one class yesterday and had even alarmed the student council president. Lin realized that the news had probably already spread throughout the Academy. She told him to consider himself unlucky, remarking that Senior Chung Na was notoriously terrifying. Lin agreed that she was intimidating. Curious, he then asked whether only teachers had the authority to open the holographic simulation arena. She replied that they did not, and asked if he had not checked the class monitor permissions. She explained that class monitor permissions included, but were not limited to, viewing the basic information of class members, managing class groups, and approving holographic simulation arena usage applications submitted by students in their class. She added that class monitors could also directly submit simulation arena usage applications without needing anyone else's approval. She then instructed Lin to open the special tab and submit an application through it. She pointed out the application option under the special tab. All he had to do was apply for student mode access to the holographic simulation arena. Once the Academy's smart brain approved the request, he would be granted permission to enter. Lin thanked her and said that he had already found the option. However, she warned him that, as a freshman, his application would most likely be rejected. She nearly choked on her drink when he informed her that it had already been approved. She was stunned that Lin's application had received instant approval. When other students applied, they often had to wait 3 full weeks, and no one had ever received such special treatment. She then explained that the holographic simulation arena was generally only available to sophomores after waiting 3 weeks for approval. To gain access, students usually had to spend at least 500 exchange points and successfully clear the arena. If they failed, all of the exchange points spent on the application would be forfeited. Lin reflected that he only had 800 exchange points at the moment and could not afford to fail even once. However, he remembered that the top 3 students in the comprehensive exam would earn the qualification to enter the New World early. Chuan had also mentioned that the class monitor position would be re-elected after the comprehensive exam. When that time came, Lin might not get another opportunity to hold the position even if he wanted to. Then there was Wang Delin, who still wanted revenge. Lin recalled that the strongest student in the class was Xiao Yue, with Wang Dalin following closely behind. Once either of them became the class monitor, he would lose the opportunity to freely use the holographic simulation arena. No matter what, Lin was determined to increase his strength before the exam. He stood up, causing Ting Ting to ask whether he was heading to class. Lin replied that he was. They said goodbye to each other. She muttered that he was incredibly hardworking, just as expected of someone who had become the acting class monitor. At the physical fitness classroom, a student named Liang Ziyue from class 6 scoffed in disbelief, questioning how someone with such poor stats could still have been chosen as the acting class monitor. He stated that the instructor must have lost his mind. Wang Dalin was furious at Chuan. After asking around, he discovered that all of the instructors teaching the freshmen were actually repeat students from the previous year. He believed they were just a bunch of noobs who had failed to advance to sophomore year. He then sneered that Lin was always training alone after class and acting unbelievably pretentious. On top of that, he felt that Xiaoyue was looking down on him. Ziyue suggested that instead of waiting 3 months for the assessment, they could teach Lin a lesson immediately. Ziyue revealed that he knew a sophomore from the disciplinary department who had informed him that violating school rules resulted in point deductions, so he had come up with a plan. Meanwhile, Lin was busy training on the treadmill. His basic physical fitness was currently at level 1, with 18 out of 100 proficiency points. He noticed that it was almost 7 p.m. There were only 10 minutes left before curfew, which was just enough time for him to walk back to the dormitory. Since he trained after class every day, he estimated that he would reach level 2 by next week. He reached for the door and tried to open it, but it would not budge. He quickly realized that it had been locked from the outside. He could not help but think that whoever had done it had been far too careless. He felt frustrated. Curfew was only moments away, and he might end up spending the night inside the gym. Then he heard a clicking sound. He immediately looked around. The lights suddenly went out, briefly startling him. He knew the academy was not poor, so he could not understand why they would cut the power at night. In another setting, a student reported to Chen Yu, a member of the disciplinary department, the head of Year 2, Class 1, and the overall second-year head. He explained that his junior, Liang Ziyue from freshman Class 6, had informed him that a freshman acting class monitor had blatantly violated curfew rules. He suggested making an example out of him as a warning to others. Yu stated that the principal was away and that the student council president had no time to deal with such trivial matters. Since he also served as the head of the freshman year, he would not tolerate any disciplinary issues. Han Sen, a Year 2 Class B student and fellow member of the disciplinary department, was impressed. He led the way. Sen had an arrangement with Ziyue. Ziyue would gather evidence of rule violations among freshmen, while Sen would step forward to enforce the law. He thought about how Lin had only recently become the acting class monitor and had likely received a large amount of exchange points. To Sen, this looked like the perfect opportunity to make a huge profit for himself. He opened the locked door and was surprised to find that nobody was inside. Yu asked him what was wrong. He simply replied that he had heard some noise and thought someone might be hiding inside the training grounds. Neither of them knew that Lin was holding his breath behind the door. Sen looked around and found the situation strange. Yu noticed that the door had been locked from the outside, making it impossible for anyone to be inside. He suggested that Sen had probably heard it wrong. Sen agreed, but deep down he was furious that the kid was not there. While their backs were turned, Lin seized the opportunity to slip away. He managed to escape outside. He let out a sigh of relief. Freshmen were forbidden from being outside after curfew. If he was caught, he would definitely lose points. The entire situation felt too coincidental. He had only just been locked inside the training room, yet members of the disciplinary department had arrived to patrol the area almost immediately. He wondered whether someone was deliberately targeting him, or if he was simply overthinking things. He was startled when he looked up. There were 2 moons in the sky. The instructor had once explained that the academy was designed entirely according to the laws of the Norma world. That made Lin suspect that the new world might also have 2 moons. Lin could no longer return to the training grounds, so he needed to quickly find a place to hide for the night. A large creature suddenly let out a breath. The sound alone filled him with dread. Then the creature turned its gaze toward him. Lin froze in place. Panic surged through him. It was the same dragon from the entrance ceremony. It spread its wings and locked onto him. Lin immediately ran as fast as he could. He glanced back repeatedly, hoping it would not catch up. He had no intention of becoming the dragon's midnight snack. Up ahead, he spotted a house. He decided to hide there first. He pushed open the gate. Lin assumed that the dragon would not follow him inside, which meant he should be safe. The moment he stepped in, he was stunned. It was a garden farm, with a chicken standing proudly in the center. He spotted an enormous cabbage. At that size, he was not even sure it could still be called a cabbage. The fruits around the garden glowed faintly and gave off an incredibly sweet aroma. Then his attention shifted to the chicken. He could not help thinking that it looked delicious. The bird was so plump that it practically advertised itself as dinner. The chicken noticed him. Lin nearly jumped out of his skin when it suddenly breathed fire. Then it leaped straight toward him. But before it could reach him, someone grabbed it. Lin immediately asked the man who he was. The man asked which class he belonged to. He pointed out that Lin should have been asleep in his dormitory, yet instead, he'd run into his property and even tried to steal his chicken. Then, there's a moment of silence. Lin asked who he was. The man was clearly annoyed, but he still answered. He introduced himself as Song Junlang, the minister of the logistics department. He could not believe that Lin had barged into his territory without even knowing who he was. A system panel identified him as Song Junlang, minister of the logistics department. Junlang immediately recognized that Lin was a freshman. He pointed out that freshmen were already breaking curfew and violating school rules only 2 days after enrollment. On top of that, Lin had even frightened his chicken. He demanded to know how Lin planned to compensate him. Lin quickly apologized and explained that he had only stumbled into the area by accident while trying to escape from a giant dragon outside. He insisted that he had never intended to break any rules. He then explained how he had been locked inside the training room, and how he had sneaked outside when members of the disciplinary department arrived, only to run into the dragon afterward. Junlang assured him that the big lizard would not attack him. He remarked that Lin looked so weak that the creature probably would not even be interested in him. Lin was speechless that someone had just referred to a dragon as a big lizard. Then Junlang revealed that being locked inside the training grounds was actually a common trick used by those brats in the disciplinary department. Lin asked whether he meant that someone had deliberately been trying to set him up. Junlang explained that exchange points served as the primary currency within the academy. He pointed out that buying equipment, activating the holographic simulation arena, and exchanging rare resources from the New World all required massive amounts of exchange points. He went on to explain that members of the disciplinary department were especially fond of playing a game they called entrapment. First, they would trick students into breaking the rules. Then they would privately approach them afterward and offer to settle the matter. He further explained that credits were the key resource needed to advance to the next grade and gain entry into the new world. If students wanted to avoid having points deducted, they could simply hand over a few hundred exchange points as a so-called fine. Lin found the entire scheme disgusting. The only person he truly held a grudge against was Wang Dalin. He could not believe that Wang Dalin had gotten involved with people from the disciplinary department. Junlang continued speaking. He pointed out that staying outside all night and trespassing within the logistics department were both violations of academy rules. Committing both offenses together would cost Lin a considerable number of points. Lin suddenly heard people approaching. Junlang pointed out that members of the disciplinary department were always eager to catch students breaking rules, yet they never dared to inspect the logistics department. He teased Lin by saying that he could simply open the door and hand him over so the academy could punish him. Lin thought it over. Since this man had just exposed the tricks used by the disciplinary department, he knew Junlang would not go through all that effort just to watch him embarrass himself. Junlang was pleased by how quickly Lin caught on. At least his explanation had not been wasted. He then asked Lin whether he knew how to cook. Lin was completely confused. He replied, "Maybe." Back on Blue Star, he occasionally watched cooking tutorials while doom scrolling, but he had never actually cooked anything himself. Junlang replied that as long as he could manage it, that was good enough. His standards were not particularly high. He then offered to deal with the people outside and guarantee that Lin would not lose a single point, in exchange for a small favor. He had been craving beggar's chicken for a long time, and he wanted to use the chicken in his hands to make the dish. Lin was stunned that he was the one expected to cook it. Junlang pointed out that Lin was already trapped there anyway. He had only 2 choices: open the door, go outside, accept punishment and lose points, or stay there, cook beggar's chicken, and let Junlang smooth everything over for him. Lin agreed to cook the beggar's chicken. Junlang then asked Lin to confirm that he was choosing to make beggar's chicken entirely of his own free will, and that nobody was forcing him in any way. Lin repeatedly assured him that it was completely voluntary. However, deep down, he had a terrible feeling about this. Junlang pointed toward the house and instructed Lin to hide quietly while he dealt with the group outside. Lin thanked him for the help and hurried toward the house. The two students soon arrived. Junlang recognized Chen Yu and described him as the second-year head who held multiple positions and was considered one of the disciplinary department's biggest stars. Junlang pointed out that Yu was wandering around in the middle of the night instead of sleeping, and had even brought people into the logistics department. He jokingly asked whether Yu had gotten hungry and come looking for a free meal. Yu replied that while patrolling, they had noticed the principal's beloved pet acting strangely. Concerned that someone might have broken in and caused trouble, they had come specifically to investigate. He glanced at the chicken and remarked that Junlang was wasting time on pointless things late at night. Junlang asked whether they had discovered the reason behind the unusual behavior. He commented that they somehow had time to meddle in his affairs despite being unable to manage their own responsibilities properly. Sen responded that the logistics department was still part of the academy and that the disciplinary department had the authority to patrol and inspect rule violations throughout the entire campus. He stated that they currently suspected a freshman of violating curfew and wandering around outside at night. Because of that, Junlang had no right to obstruct their inspection. Junlang pointed out that he had been speaking to Yu, yet a lackey had dared to interrupt. He reminded them that everyone knew the sort of things members of the disciplinary department did behind closed doors. He warned that he would submit a formal disciplinary report directly to the principal regarding the disciplinary department's attempt to trespass into the logistics department. Sen was furious, but Yu signaled for him to remain silent. Yu sneered and said that Junlang's only tactic was using the principal's name to pressure others. He pointed out that everyone in Dawn Academy knew Junlang's comprehensive strength rating was not even C rank. If the principal had not personally appointed him, he would never have qualified to advance to his second year, let alone become a department minister. He mocked Junlang as a nepotism hire whose abilities did not match his position and told him not to lecture others about rules and proper conduct. Lin listened from inside and realized that Yu was especially hostile toward Junlang. After learning that Junlang had been personally appointed by the principal despite having a strength rating below C rank, Lin could not help but wonder who Song Junlang really was. Yu and Junlang glared at each other. Lin was worried that they were about to start fighting. Junlang scoffed. He mocked Yu, saying that despite knowing exactly who he was and what connections he had, Yu still dared to provoke him. To Junlang, that could only mean Yu's brain was not functioning properly. Sen argued that even if Junlang had a good relationship with the principal, he could not openly ignore academy rules. He reiterated that inspections were an official power granted by the academy, and Junlang had no right to block them arbitrarily. Suddenly, Yu received a call from the student council president. He answered it. The student council president informed him that the smart brain had reported his inspection of the logistics department. He then ordered Chen Yu to return immediately and stated that he was not permitted to disturb Junlang. Yu argued that they were merely investigating an anomaly. He was incredibly annoyed. They had finally found a chance to make trouble for Junlang. Sen argued that the president should not show favoritism. He insisted that the freshman could still be hiding somewhere inside the logistics department. Since they had not found the student yet, he did not want to leave. The student council president's tone became noticeably firmer as he explained that the principal, and even the entire academy, owed Junlang a tremendous favor. Because of that, regardless of what Junlang chose to do, as long as it did not harm the academy's fundamental interests, nobody had the right to interfere. Yu clicked his tongue in frustration. In the end, he decided to leave. Sen could not believe they were actually backing down, but before Yu walked away, he warned Junlang to watch himself. Junlang returned those exact words right back to him. Moments later, Lin apologized to Junlang for causing him trouble. He had noticed how harshly the two of them spoke to each other. However, what surprised him even more was learning that the principal owed a student a favor. Junlang simply laughed it off and told Lin that he was overthinking things. He explained that it had nothing to do with him. The real reason was that he and Yu had never gotten along from the very beginning. As for the inspection, Yu had only wanted an excuse to cause trouble for him. He then urged Lin to start making the beggar's chicken. Lin agreed, although he could not help wondering whether Junlang truly craved beggar's chicken that badly. Before they began, Lin made it clear that he could not guarantee the taste would be authentic. Junlang replied that as long as it was properly cooked, that would be good enough. Lin started cooking. Then, he wrapped the chicken in leaves and cooked it over an open fire. Then they waited. He reflected that ever since being dragged to the academy, this was the first time he had truly been able to relax. 2 hours later, it was finally done. The moment Lin opened it, a mouth-watering aroma filled the air. It was his first time cooking, but he was pleased because it seemed to have turned out well. He jokingly wondered whether he might actually possess a hidden talent for becoming a master chef. Junlang remarked that it looked delicious. He tore off a piece and handed it to Lin. Lin asked whether he was not going to eat. Junlang declared that, as a senior, there was no way he would fight a junior over food. The first bite should always belong to the chef. Lin replied that he would not be polite about it since he had not even eaten dinner yet. He took a bite. Junlang asked how it tasted. Lin replied that the chicken was incredibly tender, completely free of any strange odor, and even carried a subtle sweetness. He admitted that he had never eaten chicken this delicious before. Junlang clarified that he was asking how Lin's body felt after eating it. Lin was confused by the question and wondered what his body was supposed to feel. Then it hit him. A burning sensation suddenly erupted in his stomach, and it felt as though his internal organs were melting. Junlang asked whether it hurt badly, and whether he felt anything besides the pain. He told Lin to endure it because everything would be fine once he got through it. Lin immediately realized why Junlang had refused to eat. That guy had done it on purpose because there was clearly something strange about the chicken. Sweat poured from his body. The pain was unbearable. It felt as though it were flowing through every drop of blood in his veins, as if a raging fire were burning inside his body. Yet alongside the pain, a strange sensation emerged. It was a feeling of power, unlike anything he had ever experienced before, steadily rising from deep within him. Junlang opened a small spiral-bound notebook filled with detailed research notes regarding a specially bred, hybrid, iron-crested chicken number 3. The records listed its weight at 18 caddies, marked its safety assessment as non-toxic, and detailed its genetic modifications. According to the notes, the chicken contained potential stimulating factors capable of significantly enhancing a person's basic attributes. However, the records also warned of a powerful rejection reaction during the stimulation process, with any benefits only becoming apparent after the subject awakened. He wrote in the notebook that, although the chicken had already undergone multiple generations of crossbreeding, a strong rejection reaction still occurred after consumption. Further improvements would be required. As for the enhancement effects, he would have to wait until Lin woke up before he could confirm the final results. The next day, at the logistics department, the room was a complete mess. Lin slowly woke up, though his head was still spinning. Junlang noticed that he was finally awake. Lin was furious with him. He had trusted the guy, only to end up being used as a guinea pig. Junlang explained that he had tested it on himself first, so he could guarantee that there was no danger to Lin's life. Lin shouted that he had practically died from the pain. He ranted that, after working so hard to stay alive, if he ended up dying because of a meal, he would never forgive Junlang, even as a ghost. Junlang tried to calm him down by pointing out that he was perfectly fine now, and told him not to be angry. Instead, he urged Lin to look at his stat panel. Lin remained suspicious. Junlang told him to trust him and promised that he would be pleasantly surprised. Lin glared at him, and decided to trust him one last time. He opened his status panel, which displayed his personal information. It identified him as Xiaolin, student ID 201235, with 0 credits and 0 exchange points. His attributes were listed as 4 strength, 2 agility, 2 intelligence, and 5 constitution. The panel also evaluated both his physical attack and magic attack capabilities at rank F. He was stunned by what he saw. His strength had increased by 1 point, and his constitution had increased by 2 points. As a result, his physical attack evaluation had risen from F- to F. Lin could not understand how something like this was possible, but there were even more surprises. His basic physical fitness had reached level 3, with a proficiency of 1 out of 100. He realized that not only had his attributes increased, but even his basic physical fitness proficiency had advanced by 2 levels. Junlang was ecstatic with the outcome. He cheered that it had actually worked. Lin pointed out that, as the guinea pig who had been subjected to the experiment, he deserved to know the truth. He asked whether the effects he was experiencing had been caused by that chicken. Junlang invited him to sit down so they could talk properly. He explained that the creature was called the hybrid iron-crested chicken. It was a new breed he had created by crossbreeding an ordinary domestic chicken with an iron-crested bird from the normal world. He then asked Lin whether he had ever read transmigration novels before. Lin replied that he had. He asked Lin to imagine a primitive man suddenly being transported into modern society, and then asked how long such a person would survive. Lin remarked that he had heard of that theory before. He explained that if a primitive man were suddenly transported into the modern world, his immune system would be unable to adapt to the new environment. Modern pathogens would quickly overwhelm him, and he would not survive for long. Junlang told him that he was absolutely right. The normal world and Blue Star were two completely different worlds. Because of that, a normal person's constitution alone was not enough to withstand the environment of the new world. That was why the academy prohibited students from entering the new world until their second year. Only after their attributes reached a certain standard could they properly adapt to the environment there. Lin finally understood why the student council president had reacted the way he did when the principal mentioned allowing freshmen to enter the new world ahead of schedule. A sudden idea then flashed through Junlang's mind. He wondered whether the natural resistance possessed by indigenous creatures of the new world could be used to help freshmen adapt more quickly. He explained that in the beginning, he had directly consumed creatures from the new world. However, the rejection reaction had been incredibly severe. Not only did his attributes fail to increase, but he had also become seriously ill. Lin could not help but think that the man was ruthless even toward himself. Ever since that first failed experiment, Junlang had been researching ways to reduce the rejection reaction. Eventually, through continuous crossbreeding and countless improvements, he developed the current method. However, he warned Lin that this form of dietary therapy built up resistance. As a result, it was only effective the first time a person consumed a specific breed. Lin nodded in understanding. He pointed out that if people could increase their attributes infinitely just by eating, there would be no reason for the academy to establish physical training courses in the first place. Junlang asked what he thought about it. He pointed out that although the hybrid iron-crested chicken would no longer have any effect on Lin, there were still plenty of other edible hybrid breeds available. Lin immediately understood what he meant. The man was simply looking for a willing and free guinea pig. Junlang merely chuckled. Lin agreed, but only on the condition that his life would never be put in danger. Junlang assured him that it would not. Lin said that he should head back to class. Before leaving, he asked how long he had been unconscious. Junlang replied that he had been out for 2 days. Lin was completely shocked. He immediately worried that his credits had probably already dropped into the negatives. Junlang told him to relax. He claimed that he had connections in high places. Because of that, Lin's leave of absence had already been approved. From that point forward, it would not be a problem if he spent time with Junlang at night, instead of returning to the dormitory. Lin let out a sigh of relief. He said goodbye and prepared to leave. Junlang reminded him to come back that night. At the cafeteria, Xiao Yue was eating alone. She overheard Dalun talking to Sen at another table. Sen was furious. He told Dalin not to bring up the matter involving Lin because he was still angry about getting severely reprimanded. Dalin argued that he still could not accept it. They had locked Lin inside the training grounds and waited for him to break the rules so they could catch him. Yet somehow, the guy had simply vanished for 2 entire days. He had spent all day asking around and learned that not only had Lin avoided having points deducted or getting expelled, but he had somehow become involved with Junlang from the logistics department as well. Xiao Yue overheard the conversation and realized that she had not seen Lin for the past 2 days either. She was startled when someone suddenly placed a food tray across from her. It was Lin. She immediately asked what he had been doing for the last 2 days. Lin replied that it was a long story and that he would explain everything later. Dalin noticed him. He could not believe that Lin actually had the nerve to show up in the cafeteria. He walked over and greeted him as their resourceful acting class monitor. He pointed out that Lin had missed classes for 2 straight days and had completely disappeared. Because of that, he had assumed Lin had been expelled for violating academy rules. Sen tried to stop him from making a scene. He added that he had heard Lin had been working very hard. However, he advised him not to waste his effort, because trash would always be trash, no matter how much it trained. He continued mocking him, saying that no matter whose leg Lin chose to cling to, the gap between them was something Lin would never overcome in his entire life. Lin sarcastically replied that Dalin should just keep being amazing. Dalin was instantly irritated by his attitude. He shouted at Lin not to get ahead of himself just because he had attached himself to Junlang. He pointed out that within the academy, strength was the absolute truth. Before leaving, he told Lin to keep acting arrogant while he still could. Once the comprehensive assessment arrived, he would finally understand what a real gap looked like. Lin muttered that the guy was crazy. Xiao Yue asked whether he had not seen the notice yet. Lin asked what she meant. She informed him that the schedule for the first comprehensive assessment had been moved forward. Lin clearly had no idea. She explained that it had originally been scheduled for 3 months later, but it had now been pushed up to only a month and a half away. The preparation period had been cut in half, meaning Lin had far less time to improve his abilities than he had expected. His class that day was basic meditation. Since he had already missed 2 days of lessons, he knew he had to make up for the lost time. Otherwise, let alone reaching the top 3, he might not even pass the assessment itself. The substitute instructor for basic meditation was a third-year student named Li Miling. She immediately asked whether he was the kid called Xiaolin. She remarked that he was the one who had bullied Cheng Na, caused trouble in her swordsmanship class, and even forced her to agree to his overly ambitious and disrespectful request. Lin replied that she had misunderstood. He explained that he had never bullied Cheng Na. She was the one who had decided to test his abilities, and he had simply passed through his own efforts. Miling immediately called that complete nonsense. She had heard that Lin insisted on pursuing dual cultivation of magic and martial arts. Cheng Na had advised him out of genuine goodwill, but he refused to listen, and had even brought the student council president to pressure her. She shouted that if Cheng Na had not personally given her a heads-up beforehand, she would not have allowed him to step even half a foot into her classroom. She told him that he should be profoundly grateful to Cheng Na. Lin replied that he understood. She stated that young fools who did not understand the vastness of the world simply failed to appreciate Cheng Na's sincere intentions. She explained that Cheng Na had once mentored a junior. That person had been just as stubborn as Lin and had insisted on pursuing the path of dual cultivation of magic and martial arts. Cheng Na had advised him again and again, but he simply refused to listen. In the end, she had no choice but to let him walk his own path. The result was that during his very first skirmish in the New World, because he had spent all of his time trying to balance swordsmanship and half-baked cultivation, he was torn apart alive by an alien race. When his body was finally sent back, it was nothing more than a puddle of minced flesh. Cheng Na blamed herself for what happened, and the incident became a lifelong nightmare that haunted her. Mei Ling stopped speaking. She was barely holding back her tears. Lin finally realized that Cheng Na opposed his path of dual cultivation, not because she looked down on him, but because she had already witnessed the exact same tragedy once before. He replied that he understood. He assured Mei Ling that he would never allow such a tragedy to happen to him. He explained that, on the contrary, everything he was doing was for the sake of surviving in the new world. She scoffed and remarked that he certainly talked big. Then she bluntly informed him that she would not be giving him any private makeup lessons for the 2 days he had missed. He would have to figure things out on his own. Lin replied that he understood. Xiao Yue waved at him and signaled that there was an empty seat beside her. Then she handed over the notes from the past 2 days. Lin thanked her. He had been worried about falling behind in class, so he was relieved that he could still count on her. He began reading through the notes. According to the notes, the world was divided into 4 major elements: wind, fire, water, and earth. Powerful mages manipulated these elemental forces at will, arranging and combining them much like lines of code to construct powerful spells. The essence of meditation was to perceive these elemental particles drifting through the air, establish a connection with them, and gradually learn how to control them. Lin tried following the instructions, but he could not perceive anything at all. He was having an extremely difficult time. That night, Lin told Junlang that he had hit a bottleneck in his meditation class. He asked whether Junlang had anything that could enhance perception after eating it. Junlang joked that he was not Doraemon. He explained that Lin's situation was completely normal. The hardest part of meditation had never been leveling up, but taking the very first step from 0 to 1. For many people, going from 1 to 50 might only take a week or 2. But going from 0 to 1 could easily take 1 or 2 months. Lin could not afford to wait that long. There was only a little over a month left before the first comprehensive assessment, so he needed to improve every aspect of his strength as much as possible before then. Junlang advised him to seek help from classmates who had enrolled in magic system courses. Elemental perception was directly tied to the intelligence attribute. The higher a person's intelligence, the stronger their sensitivity to the elements, and the easier it was to break through the initial threshold. Lin suddenly remembered that, as the acting class monitor, he had the authority to view the basic stat information of his classmates. And the person with the highest intelligence score that came to mind was Xiao Yue. He opened her profile and was shocked by what he saw. According to the information displayed, Xiao Yue only had 2 years left to live. The next day, Lin made his way to the classroom. He opened the door. He was the second person to arrive. Xiao Yue greeted him with a good morning. He took a seat beside her. Then he revealed that, as the acting class monitor, he had the authority to view the profiles of every student in the class, including information about their lifespan. He told her that he had seen her profile and that her natural lifespan showed only 2 years remaining. Internally, he panicked. It felt awkward because he was prying into her private information. She was visibly surprised, but she simply replied that it was true. She asked why he had suddenly brought up something like that. He asked whether she was suffering from a serious illness or some kind of incurable disease. He added that they had already faced life and death together, so he wanted to help her find a solution if possible. She shook her head. Then she explained that it was neither a serious illness nor a terminal disease. She had simply been born that way. Lin had not expected that answer. Now he finally understood why she had shown so little interest when Chuan talked about lifespan before. She explained that he had probably heard from the teachers that students who failed the entrance assessment would be sent back to Blue Star. For most people, returning home would not be a major problem. But for her, being sent back meant having only 2 years left to live, with no way to change her fate. However, thanks to his help, she had been able to remain at the academy and seize her only chance. So she sincerely thanked him. Lin blushed slightly and replied that she was welcome. As she had said, they had simply been trying to maximize their rewards back then. It had been a mutually beneficial arrangement and a win-win situation. He told her that if she ever needed help, she could come to him at any time. After surviving the entrance test together, he had long since considered her a friend. A noise suddenly came from the doorway. Then Mei Ling walked in while muttering that she had to teach those little brats again. If she had known it would be this troublesome, she would never have gotten greedy for those credits and accepted such a lousy substitute teaching job. She noticed Xiao Yue and Lin. She remarked that they had arrived right on time. She supposed she could praise them a little for that. Lin thanked her. However, she immediately reminded him that he still had not completed basic elemental perception during the previous meditation class. She warned him that if he remained stuck at the same stage, he might as well give up and go study swordsmanship instead. Lin smiled and replied that he understood. But deep down, he could not help noticing that despite her tiny stature, her temper was unbelievably explosive. The lesson soon began. Lin focused his attention. Sure enough, just like before, he still could not perceive even the slightest trace of elemental energy. The conventional method clearly was not working. That meant there was only one final option left. He activated his scholar skill. He began checking his classmates. The first student showed no detectable skill. He checked another classmate and received a notification that a skill had been detected. He could copy Basic Meditation Level 1. From that, he realized that the overwhelming majority of students were still stuck at Level 0, while only a small handful had barely managed to break through to Level 1. Then he glanced at Xiao Yue, and as expected of a genius with an intelligence stat as high as 36, her talent in the field of magic completely surpassed everyone else. The system detected a copyable skill. Basic Meditation, Level 6. He copied her skill, and the duration was set for 3 minutes. For the first time, he saw the world through the eyes of a magician. He immediately decided to take full advantage of the borrowed basic meditation effect while it lasted. He carefully memorized the sensation of elemental perception and tried to use it to unlock the skill for himself. Meanwhile, Mei Ling was casually reading a book. In her mind, the class was so boring that she was tempted to sneak away and hang out with Chung Na instead. She was thinking about how these kids viewed magic far too simply. Breaking through elemental perception had never been easy. Among the entire class, only Xiao Yue could barely be considered talented. Then she suddenly noticed something. The elemental energies in the room were gathering toward Lin. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. After all, Lin only had 2 points in intelligence. A notification sound rang out in Lin's mind. The system informed him that he had successfully unlocked the basic meditation skill. His current level was level 1, with a proficiency of 0 out of 100. Just as Junlang had said, once he successfully perceived the existence of elemental energy even a single time, he could unlock the basic meditation skill. Mei Ling immediately walked over. She pointed out that just yesterday he had not even been able to touch the edge of elemental perception, yet today he had caused such a huge commotion. She demanded to know the truth. What kind of shameless trick had he used? Mei Ling suddenly grabbed Lin's wrist and demanded that he come with her. Lin was confused. Once they were outside, Mei Ling ordered Smart Brain to pull up student Lin's skill information. She was stunned to discover that he had actually unlocked Basic Meditation Level 1. She shouted that he already knew exactly what she wanted to ask. Mealing demanded that Lin tell her the truth immediately and stop playing games. Lin suggested that his quick success might have come from his strong learning ability and a sudden epiphany. Mealing asked if he took her for an idiot. He explained that he had desperately studied the notes Xiao Yui gave him in private. He added that he had also eaten a bunch of strange things from Yunlang. He figured that one of the fruits Junlang gave him must have temporarily strengthened his elemental perception by pure coincidence. After hearing that the items came from the madman Yunlang, Meiling suddenly found his explanation much more believable. She sternly warned him that acting as Junlang's experimental guinea pig was extremely dangerous. After all, that madman would even risk his own life for research. She advised Lin not to get himself killed. Lin thanked her for her concern. Lin then asked when they would officially start learning spells. Meiling immediately flicked his forehead, making him cry out in pain. She reminded him that his intelligence stat was only 2. She questioned why he was already thinking about learning spells when basic meditation was merely the entry threshold. Both subsequent elemental control and spell formation required intelligence as their foundation. She added that mastering spells during his first year was nothing more than a pipe dream. Her words instantly crushed Lin's excitement. Lin realized that his low intelligence stat was a fatal flaw. His scholar copy skill could only be used temporarily and required a full 7-day cooldown. That made it completely useless for daily cultivation. He silently wondered if he had no choice but to focus on developing physical attacks. To improve his chances in the upcoming assessment, he knew he needed at least one more trump card. Meiling remembered Na's comment about Lin's incredibly low stats. She guessed that he had insisted on cultivating both magic and martial arts just to raise his stats as much as possible. She concluded that the freshman assessment was simply too cruel and understood why he was so desperate to survive. A cough snapped Lin out of his thoughts. Meiling declared that she was only pointing him in the right direction out of the kindness of her heart. If it were anyone else, she would not even bother. She then asked if he remembered seeing the other students use staves to attack during the entrance test. Her question caught him by surprise. Lin immediately realized what she meant. After obtaining a staff during the test, he had successfully unleashed an energy blast despite not knowing a single spell. Meiling raised her glowing staff as she explained. While a staff was not necessary for casting spells, it could lower the threshold for elemental control and amplify the user's elemental perception. She added that the novice staves used during the entrance test came pre-enchanted with the basic skill Energy Blast. Anyone could activate it as long as their intelligence stat was not 0. She then suggested that he visit the Academy's equipment trading area and look for a novice staff with an enchanted skill. Lin enthusiastically thanked his senior. Meiling suddenly smacked him with her staff. She added that the trading area also sold defective products that could explode after only a few uses. She warned him to choose carefully and avoid getting scammed. She firmly advised Lin not to touch any flashy high-tier staves. With his low intelligence stat, he should already be grateful if he could stabilize even one basic skill. She asked if he understood. Lin said yes and thanked his senior for the reminder. She then turned to leave. However, she suddenly stopped at the door. She warned him not to recklessly show off just to become stronger. Staying alive was more important than anything else. Lin smiled faintly. Despite her fierce appearance and harsh words, he realized that his senior was surprisingly reliable and soft-hearted. Later, Lin arrived at the equipment trading area. He had a total of 800 exchange points to spend. He recalled that activating a holographic simulation required at least 500 exchange points. The points would be fully refunded if he cleared it, but permanently deducted if he failed. Since he needed to reserve those points for the simulation arena, he only had 300 exchange points left for equipment. After a full week of comparing prices and haggling, he successfully customized 2 novice weapons that perfectly suited him. His first customized weapon was an enhanced novice staff with the attached spell skill Ice Bullet and an F-rank physical damage evaluation. His second was an enhanced novice dagger with the attached skill Wind Blade and an E-rank physical damage evaluation. Lin stood inside the arena. His equipment, skills, and mindset were finally ready. He declared that it was finally time. A prompt confirmed the activation of the E-rank holographic training simulation arena. It warned that 500 exchange points would be frozen as a deposit. The full amount would be refunded upon clearing the challenge, but deducted if he failed. Lin pressed the confirmation button on the interface. The system announced that Class 7 freshman Xiaolin had requested to activate the holographic training simulation arena. In the next instant, he was transported inside. A prompt announced that the holographic training simulation arena was about to open. A rocky landscape filled with streams of glowing lava materialized around him. The system instructed the student to prepare as Lin stood ready amid the scorching terrain. The system announced the start of the blazing, molten cave dungeon. Objective A required him to reach the mission point deep inside the cave, while Objective B required him to survive a monster siege for 2 hours. Completing either objective would clear the stage. A massive, vicious rat let out a menacing squeak. The creature crawled from a dark cave tunnel, its glowing red eyes joined by countless others lurking within the shadows. Lin noted that the training arena allowed him to freely select both the training scene and monster difficulty. For this run, he had chosen E-rank difficulty. He drew his sword. The entire swarm of crystal-backed rats shrieked as they charged toward him. Our boy was eager to test the power of his new weapons. Lin unleashed Windblade. The skill launched a blade of ki with a wind element piercing effect, allowing it to inflict armor-breaking damage on its target. The monster instantly disintegrated from the strike. Lin continued his assault, releasing immense waves of energy that cut down multiple creatures at once. Lin resolved to keep grinding and growing stronger so he could survive every upcoming death assessment. At the end of the day, his ultimate goal was simple: to stay alive. Lin swung his sword and sliced through the rock-armored rats. The rats completely disintegrated beneath his blade. He noted that the armor-breaking effect allowed him to kill them much faster than when he fought the skeleton soldiers. Suddenly, a massive creature appeared before him and unleashed a deafening squeak. Lin immediately realized it was the boss because of its enormous size. He unequipped his glowing sword and noted that the timing was perfect. It was time to test the effects of his other weapon. The boss rat lunged straight at him. Lin raised his staff and formed a sharp shard of ice. He unleashed the ice bullet spell, striking the charging rat head on. The F-rank spell inflicted damage, applied a 1-second freeze effect, and reduced the target speed by 25% for 3 seconds. The giant rock-armored rat instantly froze solid. Lin quickly switched back to his sword. He swung his blade and sliced straight through the frozen monster. The creature shattered into pieces before completely disintegrating. Lin smiled in satisfaction. Combining a dagger's armor-breaking effect with a staff's crowd control ability had produced exactly the result he wanted. He then checked his status panel. His basic dagger mastery gained plus 32 EXP, raising it to level 2 with 36 over 500 EXP. His basic wand mastery gained plus 4 EXP, leaving it at level 1 with 6 over 100 EXP. Finally, his basic physical fitness gained plus 8 EXP, increasing it to level 3 with 9 over 100 EXP. He noted that actual combat was far more efficient than lifting weights at the training ground, which only gave him 2 EXP every half hour. The timer showed that he had survived for over 15 minutes. As far as he knew, participants were not required to leave immediately after completing a survival mission. Lin sat down to rest and decided to remain there for as long as possible. He wanted to recover his stamina before exploring the cave. However, a series of notification sounds suddenly disturbed him. He wondered if they were coming from the Academy's online forum. Lin opened the forum and discovered a post directly targeting him. It questioned Class 7's acting class monitor, Xiaolin, and his so-called special perfect attendance. The poster demanded to know why someone with single-digit stats was enjoying such privileges. A user named Wang Dalin accused Lin of skipping class for 2 days, despite the semester starting only a week ago. Yet Lin had lost no credits and still had perfect attendance. Dalin questioned whether he was receiving special treatment because of Jun Lang from the logistics department. He called Lin a single-digit stat trash who became acting class monitor through luck and demanded his expulsion. Other users questioned the claim, mocked Lin for cultivating both magic and martial arts, and warned that someone with his stats was asking to die. Finally, an insider from Class 7 confirmed that Lin had missed several days of class. Lin frowned as he thought about Dalin. He realized that the guy would resort to anything just to get under his skin. Suddenly, a warning flashed across his screen. The thread was no longer visible. Lin wondered why the post had disappeared. A system notice informed him that the administrator had deleted the post for spreading malicious rumors and launching personal attacks. It also stated that the publisher, Xiaolin, had been muted for 7 days. Lin wondered who had deleted it. Soon after, he received a direct message from Na. She told him to train hard and reminded him that strength was the best response. Lin smiled when he realized that Senior Na had stepped in to help him. He agreed with her advice. He had no time to waste playing childish games with Xiaolin. Our boy only needed to focus on one thing: getting stronger. Lin walked deeper into the dark cave, guided by the orange crystals illuminating the path. He noticed that the dungeons inside the simulation arena accurately replicated the real environments of the new world. As he looked down at a dead creature on the ground, he wondered why the academy still held exams with death penalties when the simulation arena already existed. Lin suddenly stopped. The area was far too quiet. Countless rock-armored rats had been swarming outside only moments ago, yet not a single sound echoed from inside the cave. Without warning, an explosion erupted within the cave. Lin braced himself as a massive burst of fire blasted him backward. He tensed as thick smoke swirled through the air. Then, his eyes widened in shock. A massive silhouette carrying an enormous weapon emerged from the smoke. It belonged to one of Planet Norma's native races. The system identified it as a black iron rank lava berserker from the troll race. On planet Norma and within the academy, life forms were divided into different tiers based on their strength. The normal rank included anyone with a total stat value below 100, including Lin and the other freshmen from his year. Next came the black iron rank, which required a total stat value of more than 100 points. It also served as the minimum threshold for entering the new world. After that came the bronze rank. Beyond bronze came the silver rank, followed by the gold rank, the dark gold rank, and finally, the legendary rank. Since the lava berserker had reached the black iron rank, its total stat value had already surpassed 100 points. Lin tightened his grip on his sword, fully aware that his own total stat value was only 13. This was not just a difficult battle. Our protagonist was about to fight an enemy that stood an entire major tier above him. Lin felt the overwhelming pressure radiating from the black iron rank opponent before him. The berserker raised its massive, glowing axe. Lin was forced to dodge as its powerful strike tore through the ground. He realized that this opponent was completely different from the suppressed Goblin King he had faced during the entrance test. The gap between them was enormous. Its stats, speed, and strength were on an entirely different level. Lin began to wonder if he could truly defeat it with his current stats. At that moment, the monster unleashed an explosive downward strike. Lin narrowly avoided the impact. He knew that he could choose to quit. The only consequence would be failing the challenge and losing 500 exchange points. However, could he truly rely on giving up whenever he encountered life-threatening danger in the future? Lin wanted to see exactly how far he could push himself against such a powerful opponent. The berserker swung its massive axe in a wide arc. Lin immediately ducked beneath the attack. Then, he noticed something. He quickly stepped behind the monster and slashed across its back. However, his attack barely left a scratch. Lin realized that he could not break through its defense. The lava berserker unleashed another devastating strike. Lin was confident that he could dodge it. He had noticed that the monster's turning speed was much slower than its frontal attacks. The lava berserker continued swinging its axe. Lin carefully studied each angle. He realized that whenever the monster changed direction to attack, its speed dropped. At the same time, a spot on its chest would light up just before every strike. Then, he found the perfect timing. An opening appeared whenever the monster raised its arm to attack. Lin immediately equipped his staff. He cast Ice Bullet, launching a blast of icy magic straight toward the monster's chest. Lin instantly switched back to his sword. Then, he drove his blade directly into the crystal embedded in the monster's chest. The crystal cracked, causing the lava berserker to unleash a furious roar. Its health had dropped to 75%. However, Lin immediately realized he was in trouble as the enraged monster prepared to counterattack. The monster launched its massive, glowing red fist straight at him. The devastating blow struck Lin head-on and violently sent him flying backward. Lin realized that although striking the monster's core dealt damage, it still was not enough. His left arm was broken, and he suspected that several of his ribs had been injured as well. Despite his wounds, Lin remained determined. After all, he could still fight. Without hesitation, he activated his Scholar Copy skill. The system detected that the Lava Berserker possessed the F-rank skill Berserk. It increased attack power by 30%, while reducing defense by 15% for 60 seconds. The system then warned that using the copied skill would trigger a weakened state afterward, reducing all his stats by 40% for 10 minutes. It asked whether he wanted to copy the skill. Lin chose to copy it. The system confirmed that he had successfully copied Berserk for 60 seconds. He believed that 60 seconds was more than enough. Lin immediately lunged forward and delivered his first strike. The attack slammed into the monster, instantly dropping its health to 42%. He noted that Berserk increased both of their attack power by 30%, while reducing their defense by 15%. The monster tightened its grip on its axe and prepared to retaliate. Before it could attack, Lin struck the monster again. He was now confident that he could break through its defense. The monster staggered backward as its health dropped to 30%. Lin knew that the joints of large monsters were always priority targets. It seemed that common sense from games also applied in this world. He swiftly unleashed his next strike, landing a heavy blow that reduced the monster's health to just 12%. As the battle continued, a prompt warned him that Berserk only had 18 seconds remaining. The enraged monster unleashed a deafening roar. Then it raised its massive axe. Lin dodged the attack and continued charging forward, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. He thrust his sword straight into the monster's chest core. Lin was certain that piercing its core would be enough to end the battle. The large red crystal shattered completely. A brilliant burst of energy erupted from the Lava Berserker's chest. Lin received a notification that Berserk had been deactivated. Another prompt warned that all his stats had been reduced by 40% for 10 minutes. He collapsed to the ground as his entire body became unbearably heavy. Lin wondered if this was the effect of the weakened state. Even so, he was thrilled that he had defeated a black iron rank enemy. The feeling of breaking through his limits was incredible. Suddenly, a system chime rang out. A notification window announced that his soul intensity had reached the required standard. His scholar talent had met the conditions for an upgrade and immediately began updating. The progress bar quickly filled before confirming that the upgrade was complete. Lin had not expected this at all. The notification revealed that his SS rank scholar talent had successfully reached level 2. Lin stared in shock as he realized that his talent skill had actually evolved. The system then displayed the upgraded talent's effects. His passive learning efficiency for all abilities had increased to 120%. He could now copy any ability with an evaluation of E rank or lower twice, with each copied ability lasting for 3 minutes. Talent abilities could not be copied, and the active copy skills uses refreshed every 7 days without accumulating. Additionally, his skill analysis accuracy had increased by 20%. Lin noted that his copy uses had increased from once a week to twice, while his passive learning efficiency had risen from 100% to 120%. He was thrilled to have gained a brand new effect. Lin thought about the increased skill analysis accuracy. It would allow him to examine skills more precisely, which should greatly help him learn and copy abilities. However, he decided to put those thoughts aside and focus on clearing the dungeon first. He would have plenty of time to study the details once he got out. He walked toward a glowing stone monument overlooking a vast lake of molten lava. Lin placed his hand against the stone altar. The system confirmed that he had completed the blazing molten cave dungeon. From that day onward, Lin immersed himself in the simulation arena twice a week. He crossed frozen snowfields while battling wolves and ventured through scorching deserts, rainforests, swamps, and various other extreme environments found across Norma. However, no matter how many monsters he killed, dungeons he cleared, or skills he copied, the scholar talent never displayed another upgrade prompt. Eventually, he decided to move on from it. Rather than continuing to overthink the mystery, he figured it would be better to find someone and ask them directly. Inside his laboratory, Yunlang wondered why Lin was suddenly asking about soul intensity. He pointed out that the subject was normally taught only during the sophomore year. Junlang explained that soul intensity represented the innate and fundamental strength of a person's soul. He added that it had absolutely nothing to do with genetics, bloodlines, or acquired cultivation. No matter how much someone raised their stats or practiced their skills, it would make no difference. Simply put, a person could not change their soul intensity. Since soul intensity could not be changed, Lin wondered why the message, "soul intensity has reached the standard," had appeared back then. Junlang enthusiastically unveiled a caged bird and announced that his latest experiment had been a huge success. Disgusted, Lin asked if he was seriously going to eat chicken again. Junlang explained that this experimental subject produced the best results when eaten raw. Lin was horrified. Junlang told him to wait while he prepared everything, leaving our boy in a panic. Junlang handed him a plate of raw chicken and told him to eat. He urged Lin to hurry while it was still fresh and warm. Lin hesitated, but after everything Senior Junlang had done to help him, he had no choice but to go through with it. He forced himself to take a bite, and the color immediately drained from his face. Lin rushed toward the trash bin and threw up. He complained about the disgusting texture and the unbearable pain in his stomach. 3 hours later, Yunlang excitedly urged Lin to check his system panel so he could record the data. Slumped over the desk, Lin asked why he was in such a hurry and begged for a moment to catch his breath. Lin opened his interface. A prompt notified him that he had acquired level 1 fire resistance. The skill reduced all fire damage taken by 30% and granted complete immunity to burns from ordinary flames. Junlang cheered loudly when he realized that the experiment had worked. Elemental resistance skills were extremely difficult to acquire through conventional training. This made Lin the first freshman to possess the passive skill fire resistance. Lin lamented that he would willingly eat a xenomorph raw if it could increase his soul intensity. Junlang brushed off his comment and reminded him for the 800th time that soul intensity was innate and could not be improved. He told Lin to give up on the idea. Junlang suddenly remembered to ask about the freshman class's upcoming first assessment. He recalled that the topic announced the previous week was Sunset Canyon Reconnaissance. Lin confirmed that the assessment was scheduled to begin at 8 o'clock the morning after next. Although he could not provide much help with the assessment, Junlang warned him that the real thing was completely different from the simulation arena. Dying in a simulation only forced someone to exit, but dying during a real assessment would deduct 10 years from their lifespan without exception. He wished Lin good luck and told him to act within his limits. Finally, he reminded him that staying alive was more important than anything else. Inside freshman class 7, Chuan tried to lift everyone's spirits by telling them to cheer up. Chuan asked why everyone looked so dejected. Dalin asked what they had to be afraid of. He confidently told everyone to follow his lead when the time came, declaring that he would kill any enemies they encountered and keep all his classmates safe. Dalin boasted that he had already reached level 2 in several courses. He confidently declared that he would charge at the front when the time came, allowing everyone else to follow him toward an easy victory. Irritated, Chuan ordered everyone to shut up and asked if they were finished arguing. Chuan then announced that Lin would serve as the chief commander for the upcoming assessment. Upon hearing this, one student questioned the decision and pointed out that Lin's stats ranked at the very bottom. Another classmate agreed, whispering that he seemed completely unreliable. Dalin immediately refused to accept the decision and angrily demanded to know what it was based on. He complained that Xiaolin's stats were the lowest in the entire academy. Lin could not even defeat a single goblin during the entrance test, and had only survived because a girl carried him. Dalin demanded to know why someone so weak deserved to command everyone else, especially when his own stats were far higher than Lin's. Chuan explained that Lin was their acting class monitor. According to the Academy's rules, the acting class monitor automatically became the default chief commander during assessments. Furthermore, Lin's stats were no longer as low as before. A status window revealed that he now possessed 10 strength, 6 agility, 5 intelligence, and 9 constitution. This gave him an E-rank physical attack evaluation and an F-rank magic attack evaluation. Internally, Chuan wondered how Lin had managed to more than triple his stats in less than 2 months. As the clock reached 7:59, he instructed everyone to remain seated and began counting down from 3. Dalin steeled himself as the countdown reached 2. Lin and Xiaoyu calmly waited as the countdown reached 1. The clock struck 8 o'clock, and everyone was instantly teleported away. The assessment had officially begun. They arrived in Sunset Canyon. The students emerged from a glowing blue magic portal, with several of them immediately tripping onto the rocky ground. Sunset Canyon's harsh environment left everyone coughing and struggling to remain standing against the powerful winds as they adjusted to their unfamiliar surroundings. Lin carefully observed the area. The system displayed their objective: escape the pursuing Thunder Kingdom army and reach the safe zone. Anyone who completed the mission would earn 10 credits and 100 exchange points. Since it was a team mission, the entire class would pass as long as more than 30% of its students reached the safe zone. The assessment also included optional missions. The first required them to infiltrate the Thunder Kingdom's border camp and map its troop deployment with at least 70% accuracy. Each participant would receive 10 credits and 200 exchange points. The second required them to kill the battalion commander of the Wolf Cavalry Battalion, rewarding each participant with 15 credits and 300 exchange points. The assessment would fail if more than 70% of the class were eliminated by the kingdom's army, and it would automatically end after 1 week. Furthermore, because this was a simulated real combat scenario, every death would deduct 10 years from the student's lifespan. Zhao Yue took notes and pointed out that they were currently standing at the canyon's entrance. She explained that according to the distributed map of the Thunder Kingdom, a supply station was located 3 kilometers ahead. Since the assessment would last an entire week, she suggested restocking there first. Lin agreed with her plan. However, he moved too close while reading her notes, catching her off guard. Completely oblivious to her reaction, he continued explaining that according to the rules, everyone would pass the mandatory mission as long as 30% of the class reached the safe zone. Before Lin could finish his thought, Dalene interrupted and accused him of planning to sacrifice 70% of their classmates as pawns while the rest escaped. Dalene turned toward the crowd and claimed that this was definitely what Lin had been thinking. He reminded everyone that dying even once would deduct 10 years from their lifespan. He demanded to know why they should act as cannon fodder for Lin. His words stirred up the crowd, causing several students to whisper that he made a good point. Another student clutched his head, terrified by the thought of losing 10 years of his life during their very first assessment. Pointing at Lin, Dalene questioned how many classes he had even attended and doubted that he felt any real sense of unity with them. He confidently declared that if they chose to follow Lin, they would all end up dead. A female student told Dalene to stop maliciously stirring up trouble. She insisted that Lin was not that kind of person. Dalene replied that there was no point in arguing and suggested that they simply divide into 2 teams. The surrounding students were confused by his suggestion. Lin stated that although he held the position of chief commander, he would not force anyone to obey his orders. Since they could not reach an agreement, Lin proposed dividing evenly into 2 teams and completing the missions separately. Dalene happily agreed, reminding everyone that Lin had proposed it himself. He called out to the class and invited anyone interested in the Reconnaissance mission to follow him. He promised to lead them to safety while ensuring that they passed the assessment. One student pointed out that escaping the canyon and reaching the safe zone directly conflicted with the Reconnaissance mission. Because of that, they could only choose to complete one objective at a time. Another student chose to follow Dalene on the Reconnaissance mission, tempted by its high exchange point reward. His classmate agreed, declaring that all their hard work over the past month had prepared them for this exact moment. Xiao Yue opposed rushing straight into the Reconnaissance mission. She reminded everyone that the academy had only provided them with enough food and water for 1 day. Dalene suggested that they simply steal more supplies from the Thunder Kingdom's military camp. A student turned to Lin and proposed establishing a gathering point. Whether they completed the Reconnaissance mission or not, everyone should return there in 3 days so they could finish the mandatory mission together. A female student agreed that having a gathering point would allow everyone to regroup safely if something went wrong. Lin accepted the proposal and selected their gathering point. He announced that whether their missions were completed or not, everyone had to return there at noon in 3 days to regroup. Dalene scoffed at them and declared that no one wanted to regroup with a bunch of cowards. He told them to wait until his team returned after completing the Reconnaissance mission. Then, they would see who still had the nerve to talk. He called for everyone seeking greater rewards to follow him. In total, 39 students joined Dalene's team to infiltrate the military camp. A student asked Lin if they were heading straight toward the supply station. Lin's team now consisted of 21 people, and their objective was to locate the supply station before waiting for an opportunity to act. Meanwhile, the remaining students questioned whether they really needed to wait for the others to return. One pointed out that they already had 20 people, which satisfied the 30% requirement. Another agreed and asked why they could not simply cross Sunset Canyon and head straight toward the safe zone. Zhao Yue asked if Lin truly intended to abandon both optional missions and focus only on the mandatory objective. Lin calmly asked who had said anything about abandoning the optional missions. He told his group that Dalene and the others were mistaken if they thought they would simply hide and scrape their way through the assessment. He declared that their first objective was to ensure that every member survived, and their second objective was to claim every single mission reward. Lin's group continued traversing the canyon. When they reached the leeward side, Lin announced that they would take a short break. The group members were relieved to finally rest. One complained that they had far too little water since he could finish his entire bottle in just 2 gulps. Xiao Yu sat nearby and scribbled something in her notes. Lin asked her about their supply situation. She informed him that the academy had only issued each student 500 milliliters of water and 2 packs of compressed biscuits. The assessment would last 7 days, yet their supplies were only enough for 1. The temperature inside Sunset Canyon exceeded 40 degrees Celsius at noon, causing the human body to lose water 3 times faster than normal. Without additional supplies, they would not survive past noon the following day. A female student finally understood why Lin had insisted on finding the supply station first. Meanwhile, Dalene and the others intended to steal supplies directly from the military camp. She was relieved that she had not joined them. Lin knew that the military camp would be heavily guarded. Trying to rob it head-on was practically begging for death. He instructed everyone to organize their equipment within 10 minutes before they continued advancing along the canyon walls. He told them that they would reach the supply station soon. Everyone needed to remain alert, erase their tracks, and avoid detection by enemy patrols. The group immediately acknowledged his orders. Powerful winds battered the group as they continued traversing the canyon. A female student suddenly sensed something and alerted the class monitor. When they looked ahead, they spotted the supply station. Lin observed the building but saw no one inside and detected no movement. He instructed everyone to form groups of 3 and search the supply station. He warned them to remain hidden and notify him immediately if they noticed anything unusual. Lin, Xiao Yue, and the female student he had previously saved entered one of the rooms. They discovered that all the supplies had already been cleared out. The female student praised Lin for remaining so calm and reliable. She felt as though he knew how to handle everything, making her wonder if he had been an impressive person back on Blue Star. Her words made Lin feel warm inside. He replied that he had only been an ordinary fresh graduate who happened to enjoy playing games in his spare time, especially strategy games. Xiao Yue suggested that they stop chatting and examine what she had found. It was a wine stopper with a strange pattern engraved on it. Xiao Yue believed that it was some kind of exclusive emblem. A student suddenly reported that they had found something. Everyone gathered around to inspect the document. It stated that on March 12th of New Century Calendar, year 45, 500 bags of wheat, 100 barrels of wine, and 50 bags of salt were scheduled to arrive at the Border Garrison Camp's 3rd Division. According to the note, the garrison receives supplies once every 7 days, with 12 deliveries scheduled in total. This shipment was the 9th batch. Zhao Yue noted that the document was written in the Norma language. It was essentially a merchant caravan's manifest for transporting supplies to the military camp. Lin stated that the supply cycle was 7 days, and the current date was March 16th. That meant the next shipment would arrive either that day or the following morning. The students cheered at the great news. They planned to ambush the merchant caravan and seize its supplies, ensuring that they would not die from thirst or starvation. Lin pointed out that the caravan carried more than just supplies. Since its personnel frequently traveled in and out of the military camp, they were undoubtedly familiar with its internal deployment. If the group captured them, they could obtain valuable intelligence, including a map of the camp's troop positions. He had noticed several wheel tracks along their route, indicating that the merchant caravan likely traveled along the same path. Up ahead was a narrow mountain pass surrounded by sheer rock walls, with only enough space for a single carriage to pass through. It was the perfect location for an ambush. Lin quickly divided the 21 students into 3 groups. He assigned the melee combatants to hide behind the rock walls on both sides of the pass, where they would pin down the caravan's guards as soon as the attack began. The ranged combatants were ordered to occupy the high ground. From there, they could launch a surprise attack while maintaining a clear view of the entire battlefield. He then assigned Xiao Yue to guard the rear and prevent anyone from escaping. As for Lin, he would launch the first attack from the front and target the caravan's leader at the earliest opportunity. Before sending everyone to their positions, he emphasized the plan one final time. They had to remain hidden until the entire merchant caravan entered the narrow pass. No one could act prematurely or attract the attention of a military patrol under any circumstances. Night eventually fell, and the merchant caravan finally arrived. The carriage wheels creaked as they rolled through the narrow pass. A woman inside one of the carriages cautiously peeked outside. Seeing her expression, the man sitting across from her asked what was wrong. She replied that someone was up there. The man became alarmed. He told her he would warn the guards and order the caravan to turn around immediately, but she answered that there was no need. The man was worried, but she insisted they keep moving forward. After all, they still didn't know who was waiting for them. Several robed figures watched the caravan from the edge of the cliff. Meanwhile, Lin waited behind a large boulder below. Xiao Yue also waited patiently. Then, someone gave the signal to attack. The guards quickly warned everyone that enemies were nearby. The archers released their arrows. The guards below looked up as countless arrows rained down on them, but unexpectedly a wall of fire stopped every single one. One of the archers stared in shock as the arrows burned to ashes. The woman who created the flames muttered that hiding up there and watching the show was quite rude. The fire in her palm suddenly scattered. Then, the flames shot toward the archers' positions. The archers immediately realized they had been discovered. At the same time, the guards launched their counterattack. Lin skillfully dodged an incoming sword. Then, he knocked the attacker back with a powerful kick. The swordsmen quickly clashed with one another. One of the students was struck by a blade. Lin immediately ordered everyone to fall back. He told the wounded students to retreat before ordering the others to tighten their formation. Meanwhile, the woman calmly watched as her enemies panicked when flames suddenly burst from the ground. Lin realized that their formation had already been broken. He knew they couldn't keep fighting like this. If they wanted to capture the bandits, they had to take down their leader first. Xiao Yue fired an attack and shouted that this was Lin's chance. The woman sensed the incoming attack and quickly created a wall of fire. At the same time, Lin used the opening to charge straight at her. The woman was caught completely off guard, but someone suddenly rushed past her. He parried Lin's attack and yelled at him not to touch her. Lin recognized him as the man who had stepped out of the same carriage as her earlier. The two swordsmen continued clashing blades. Both of them deflected every attack thrown their way. The guards suddenly charged forward, but Lin quickly activated his skills. Then, with heavy slash, he knocked the enemy's sword out of his hand. Lin grabbed the man and held him hostage. He shouted for everyone to stop or he would kill him. However, our boy wasn't even sure if they understood him, since he didn't know the normal language. Thankfully, the other guards understood the threat and stopped moving. The woman could only watch while gritting her teeth. Her guard told her to keep attacking, but she chose to surrender. She agreed to cooperate with them as long as they promised not to hurt him. The woman raised both hands in the air and said something. Unfortunately, Lin couldn't understand a word she was saying. If she was secretly ordering her guards to launch another attack, they would be in trouble. Xiao Yue quickly rushed to Lin's side. She whispered that the woman had surrendered and was willing to cooperate. In return, she asked Lin not to hurt the man. Lin realized that he had been so nervous that he forgot Xiao Yu's Norma language was already level 5. He ordered everyone to tie up the captives and tightly bind their hands and feet before heading back to the supply station. He also ordered them to treat the wounded immediately. The woman was quickly restrained. She watched as the injured enemy swordsman was helped to his feet. He even told his friend to bring his severed arm with them. Back at the supply station, 2 students stood guard. Their prisoners were locked inside one of the rooms. The student with the severed arm asked the class monitor what they should do next. Lin was bandaging an injured classmate when he apologized for underestimating their enemy. He hadn't expected a spellcaster to be hiding among the merchant caravan, and his mistake had caused everyone to get hurt. However, one student argued that they couldn't blame the class monitor for what had happened. According to the Academy's materials, spellcasters were extremely rare in the Thunder Kingdom. No one could have expected one to be hiding inside a merchant caravan. Another student pointed out that if the class monitor hadn't reacted so quickly, their injuries would have been far worse. One of the archers suggested that the leader of the merchant caravan must have an unusual identity. Lin decided to interrogate the captives first. He ordered everyone to separate the prisoners and question them one by one. He told Xiao Yue to come with him and translate. Meanwhile, the others would take turns guarding the prisoners and make sure they had no chance to speak with one another. They brought in the first guard for questioning. Lin placed a dagger against the man and threatened him. He told the guard that he would ask the questions, and he expected honest answers. Otherwise, the man would have to face the consequences. Lin first asked how many troops were stationed inside the camp. Then they brought in another captive. This time, Lin asked when the Wolf Cavalry Battalion commander left the camp each day and which route he took during his patrol. He asked another captive how many arrow towers guarded the camp's main gate and how often the guards changed shifts. By separating the prisoners and comparing their answers, they managed to uncover the lies and confirm the camp's basic information. One prisoner revealed that 4 arrow towers stood at the main gate and that the guards changed shifts every 2 hours. The camp's forces included 2 light infantry battalions and 1 wolf cavalry squadron, with around 300 soldiers in total. They also learned that the wolf cavalry battalion commander left the camp every day during the Mao hour, between 5 and 7 a.m. He patrolled the narrow path through the northern canyon and returned during the U hour, between 5 and 7 p.m. After comparing every statement, Xiao Yue concluded that their answers matched perfectly. That meant the information about the camp's outer defenses was most likely true. Lin agreed with her. However, he believed that only the woman knew the camp's most important defensive layout. Xiao Yue sighed. They had already questioned the woman 3 times, but each time she either pretended to be asleep or talked about useless matters involving the merchant caravan. Even worse, ordinary threats had no effect on her. Lin noticed that the woman didn't care whether she lived or died. However, she clearly cared deeply about her deputy. He ordered them to bring the deputy over and let the 2 prisoners meet alone. Xiao Yue asked if allowing them to meet would give them a chance to match their stories. Lin explained that he wanted them to do exactly that, while everyone listened from outside the room. Xiao Yue quickly understood. The more important the secret was, the more likely they were to discuss it in private. It took 3 students to move the injured captive. The female archer admitted that her normal language was only level 1. However, she had heard the same strange words several times, making them impossible to ignore. They shoved the captive inside the room where the woman was being held. The woman clearly hadn't expected to see him. The door was quickly shut. Then, the 2 prisoners began talking. Xiao Yue told Lin that something was wrong because their conversation sounded strange. Their words sounded similar to the normal language, but their pronunciation and grammar were completely different. Lin wondered if they were speaking in some kind of secret code. Xiao Yue replied that it was possible. However, she quickly corrected herself. She stated that it sounded less like a secret code and more like some kind of ancient language. Xiao Yue explained that some of the words sounded very similar to the norma lingua franca, but she still couldn't understand what they were saying. Lin told her to let him listen. He eavesdropped on their conversation and realized that they didn't seem to be discussing an escape plan. Lin remembered that language skills should also fall within the scanning range of his scholar talent. He immediately activated Scholar. The system detected the copyable skill, Basic Norma Lingua Franca. It also detected another copyable skill, Ancient Norma Language. On top of that, it detected Fire Shield Level 5 and Flame Bullet Level 5. Lin was surprised to discover the Ancient Norma Language skill. He copied Ancient Norma Language at its maximum level. The skill would last for 3 minutes, and he still had 1 skill slot left to use that week. The deputy begged his lord not to do it, claiming that they still had time. But the woman answered that it was already too late. The deputy argued that the camp hadn't been completely exposed yet. As long as they were still alive, there had to be a way to fix the situation. However, she revealed that the otherworlders already knew the number of soldiers inside the camp, the locations of the arrow towers, and the guards' shift schedules. She added that they even knew the Wolf Cavalry's patrol route. Lin realized that she knew everything they had learned from the interrogations. The deputy blamed himself for failing to protect the merchant caravan and declared that he was willing to take full responsibility. but the woman stated that her own arrogance had caused the situation to end this way. The deputy desperately begged her not to do it, but she had already made her decision, leaving the deputy with no choice but to grit his teeth. The woman suddenly began performing an ancient ritual. She prayed for her flesh and blood to return to dust and for her soul to cross the eternal night. Then she called upon the ancient slumbering gods and begged them to hear the call of their humble believer. Lin realized that she was performing some kind of sacrificial ritual, so he immediately barged into the room. However, the woman continued chanting, offering her flesh and blood as the door and her soul as the guide. Xiao Yue noticed strange patterns forming in the room as waves of magic power spread through the air. The ground suddenly began to shake. Everyone panicked, wondering what had happened and why the entire earth was trembling. Lin couldn't allow her to finish the chant, but it was already too late to knock her out or cover her mouth. Xiao Yue tried to stop him. The others stared at him in confusion, but Lin charged straight toward the woman. Driven by pure instinct, he drew his blade, and before the woman could speak the final words, Lin slashed her. The woman dropped to the ground. Lin froze, unable to believe that he had actually killed her. At that moment, he finally realized something. The exam was recreating the colonial war from that year. And to the Normans who had fought in that war, Lin and his classmates were nothing more than a group of otherworldly enemies who had suddenly appeared and stolen their military information. Those people looked just like them. They weren't mindless monsters created inside the simulation arena. The woman had her own thoughts and people she wanted to protect. Lin finally understood that he hadn't killed a monster. He had killed a person. But if he hadn't stopped her, then every one of them might have died. The female archer rushed inside and asked if he had killed the woman. Lin couldn't answer her. Suddenly, a powerful aura poured out of the woman's body. Lin realized that he hadn't completely stopped the sacrifice. He immediately shouted for everyone to get down. A massive crimson pillar of light erupted from the warehouse. Back at the Thunder Kingdom's camp, a soldier noticed that the light had come from the direction of the supply station. Another guard quickly reported the strange activity. The Wolf Cavalry Battalion commander ordered the Wolf Cavalry to assemble and investigate immediately. Meanwhile, the warehouse was completely engulfed in flames. Hidden beneath the wreckage, Lin cursed at the massive commotion they had caused. He was certain that the camp in the distance had already noticed them. Many of his classmates coughed heavily because of the thick smoke. Lin realized that the military camp had definitely noticed the disturbance by now. He ordered everyone who could still move to get up, check on the wounded, and stay away from the red patterns. The female archer told everyone to count off before ordering the ranged group to guard the entrance with her. The deputy had protected the woman's body from being crushed beneath the rubble. Meanwhile, the other guards had managed to break free from their ropes. The students noticed them and immediately shouted for everyone to stop them from reaching their weapons. Suddenly, one of the enemy guards was struck in the back of the head. The female archer had hit him. She coldly warned him not to run around. Meanwhile, several students worked together to pin down another guard. They shouted at him to stop struggling. Lin then saw the woman's lifeless body. His face immediately turned pale. Then he bent over and vomited. Xiao Yu handed him some water. Lin apologized for letting everyone see him in such a pathetic state, especially since he had already killed people during the earlier ambush. He remembered how the fire, explosions, and arrows had all blended together back then. He had been so focused on the plan that nothing else mattered. Just like during the entrance assessment, he had simply treated the enemies as targets trying to kill them. But this time was different. That woman was a person with her own thoughts and feelings, just like them. Lin remembered watching her begin the chant as the strange patterns beneath her feet lit up. He also remembered seeing the deputy desperately trying to stop her. Then, Lin had rushed forward and brought down his blade. He turned to Xiao Yu and asked if he had done something wrong. He wondered if he shouldn't have acted so quickly. Xiao Yu replied that if he had been even 1 second slower, they probably wouldn't be alive to talk about it now. Lin was left speechless. She reminded him that killing was still killing, and having a good reason didn't make it any easier. The Academy had designed this type of assessment to make them face that reality early. However, she told him that he didn't have time to dwell on it. Everyone was still waiting for his orders, and at that moment, he was their pillar of support. Lin understood. He decided that they couldn't remain at the supply station any longer. While waiting for him, the students gathered and discussed what they should do next. Their biggest problem was the prisoners. One student pointed out that if they released the prisoners, they would immediately report everything to the military camp. However, bringing them along would slow down their escape. Someone suggested that they simply kill them all. Everyone immediately fell silent. Xiao Yui and Lin arrived and admitted that killing the prisoners was indeed the fastest solution, but it wasn't their only choice. Lin ordered everyone to gag the prisoners and use ash and alcohol to hide their scent. Then, they would split the prisoners into groups of 3 or 4 and hide them separately inside different houses and rock crevices. The female archer pointed out that the patrols would find them sooner or later. Lin knew that the prisoners would eventually be discovered. They only needed to stop them from immediately leading the soldiers to their location. As long as this plan bought them half a day, they would have enough time to move somewhere else. He also noted that the remaining supplies from the merchant caravan would give them enough food and water for the time being. Xiao Yue reported that one teammate had suffered a serious arm injury, while 3 others could barely move. Thankfully, most of the group had only suffered minor injuries. They had also gathered almost all the information about the camp's outer defenses, leaving only the core area unknown. Someone listed the remaining key locations: the command post, the armory, and the Wolf cavalry base. Another student suggested heading straight to the safe zone. The military camp had already been alerted, so getting any closer would be far too dangerous. Another student agreed that they should leave for the safe zone immediately. Simply completing the mandatory mission alive was already good enough. Lin quietly thought about their options. Xiao Yue pointed out that if they headed straight to the safe zone, they would only complete the mandatory mission. After paying such a heavy price, settling for the lowest completion rate would be a waste. Lin remembered that Xiao Yue had only 2 years left to live. If she died during the assessment, the lifespan penalty alone would kill her instantly. He insisted that heading straight to the safe zone was their safest choice. He couldn't allow her to take such a huge risk. Xiao Yu reminded him that they were only missing the final few locations in the core area. She believed that their defense map still had a chance of meeting the required standard, so it was too early to give up. Lin quickly clarified that he wasn't giving up. He simply couldn't allow the entire group to risk getting closer to the military camp. He proposed sending the main group to the outer ridge. Xiao Yue would organize the information they had gathered into a map while observing the guards' shift changes, cooking smoke, and patrol routes from a distance. Xiao Yue asked what they would do about the camp's core area. Lin declared that he would investigate it alone. The others were shocked that he planned to go by himself. They protested that it was far too dangerous. If they were going to take such a risk, they couldn't let him carry it alone. Lin explained that bringing more people would only increase their chances of being discovered. Their goal was to confirm the locations, not start another fight. Once he got a clear look at the command post, armory, and Wolf cavalry base, he would immediately retreat. Xiao Yue asked how he planned to enter the camp. Lin predicted that the Wolf cavalry would rush toward the supply station first, creating openings in the perimeter patrols and shift changes. The soldiers would also assume that the attackers were fleeing in a panic, so they wouldn't expect anyone to approach the military camp instead. He ordered Xiao Yue to remain on the high ground and look after everyone. If she went with him, no one would be left to lead the group outside. Xiao Yu finally agreed. However, she reminded him that if he didn't return, they wouldn't be able to complete the map either. Lin smiled and replied that he understood. With the plan finalized, Lin ordered everyone to pack the supplies and erase every trace they had left behind. They would move out in 10 minutes. Thanks for watching, bros. If you enjoyed this update, make sure to drop a like and hit subscribe so you never miss the next chapter we upload here on Manhwa Updater. New episodes from the main Manhwa dealer channel will always land here every week, so stick around and stay updated. And hey, if you want more fire stories, check out the latest upload on the main channel right after this. As always, stay cool, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.